Okay, hopefully everybody has had a chance to get settled in, but I think it's time we get started. We've got a lot to cover today. So first of all, I want to thank everybody for coming out. I'm excited to see so many folks here interested in phase 2 of CBRE, which is what we'll be discussing today, specifically the small projects tariff, the LMI RFPs, and the RFPs for Molokai and Lanai. I'm just going to briefly run over our agenda. So we've got folks from the Commission, Hawaiian Electric, lots of stakeholders on the WebEx, and hopefully we'll have a very productive discussion with all these good people today. So we'll have presentations from Hawaiian Electric on small projects tariff, and we'll have Q&A after the presentation, so about half an hour for each. We'll have another presentation on the LMI RFPs, and again, half an hour and a half an hour or so for questions. We'll have a 10-minute break, and then we'll have another hour divided up the same way, half-hour presentation and half hour for questions on the Molokai and Lanai RFPs. And then we'll finish up with any questions, discussion of next steps, and some closing remarks. So the basic objectives the Commission has for this technical conference is to hear what the companies have to say about these three parts of the CBRE Phase 2 program, and then both give an opportunity for stakeholders to provide feedback on the tariff and these RFPs and ask questions and try and clarify. There's a lot going on here, and I think we will all benefit from learning about it. So. And then we'll finish up with any discussion and questions on the next steps for this docket. So with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Hawaiian Electric. And if you can tell me who is it that's going to be presenting, I can transfer over directly to you, or you can just request it.
If you can hear me, that would be Mark Wong with Hawaiian Electric.
Okay, let me see if I can transfer over to Mark Wong.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Okay.
While we're getting that up, I can kick off. This is Shelly Kimura from Hawaiian Electric. Is that okay, Mike?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I can now see Mark's screen, but please feel free to continue.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. We want to first thank the Commission for giving us this opportunity to share what we filed a few weeks ago and discuss the tariff. We're very excited about phase 2. We think there's so much opportunity for Hawaii and for many stakeholders, and we share and support in the Commission's objectives that they put forth in the docket. As you'll see, sometimes there are competing objectives in what we were trying to put forth, and we sometimes have to make some judgment calls on what the trade-offs are. So you'll see a few of those instances in the materials that Mark is going to present. Really, we wanted to put forth these concepts and use this as a draft to get feedback. The success of CBRE Phase 2 at this scale is really going to be dependent upon aligning the interests of our many stakeholders. We need all of them to view this as viable and successful. And so that's why this input is so important. And today is a critical part of getting that input, but also we'd like to seek input more broadly than this. You know, when we can align those interests, we think there's so much opportunity, especially in this time, for CBRE to contribute to Hawaii's economic stimulus. And that's going to come in the form of investments in Hawaii, job creation, lower costs of electricity for customers, and of course, making really aggressive strides in our environmental goals. And we're looking forward to doing all of those things. So with that, I'm gonna pass it over to Mark, and he can walk you through, and we're looking forward to getting comments and questions.
Great, thank you, Shelley. As mentioned, my name is Mark Wong. I'm the manager of the CBRE and SIA programs at Hawaiian Electric. And I would also like to thank the commission chairs, staff, parties, and stakeholders for this opportunity to present. Just a quick review of the agenda. We're going to go through our strategic goals and guiding principles, and these are really the foundation that we use to construct and design the tariff and fulfill the requirements of the DNO. In order to make this a successful program, we sought objectives by looking at the program from different viewpoints. So this presentation is divided by the subscriber perspective, subscriber organizations perspective, and also some policy objectives and improvements that we'd like to propose. So as stated in the decision and order from April 9th, we have the Commission strategic outcomes, and just wanted to note that these align very well with Hawaiian Electric's goals and objectives, as well as those in other orders. In addition, our desire to promote economic opportunities in the post-COVID-19 recovery. With that, go to the next slide. The next slide is Hawaiian Electric's guiding principles. And in addition to the Commission's strategic outcomes, the companies adopted these principles and have really had the strategic outcomes from the Commission and these guiding principles pretty much at every meeting and discussion. This was out in front. These guiding principles, a lot of them are based on lessons learned and best practices that the companies and the community has experienced. But we are open to stakeholder feedback, and you'll hear that throughout this presentation. That's partly an attempt to be transparent, but really identifying the need to get feedback because CBRE has so many parties involved. We need to make sure that this works and hopefully is a win-win for everyone. But we realize that in many cases that not every stakeholder will agree on things. And as Shelley noted, we have subscriber organizations, policy directors, and we don't align. There may be trade-offs to consider. And throughout this presentation, we want to be transparent and kind of illustrate the internal discussions that we had and how we balanced interests to come up with our proposal. And again, we seek feedback through this continued process. So if you've seen the tariff, there was a order for a small projects tariff, and I wanted to point out that we really thought that it made sense to combine elements throughout the order for the RFPs, mid-tier large projects, and LMI components. So in developing this draft, we put everything together in one tariff and tried to simplify and organize that in a way that would be helpful for all parties. So throughout this presentation, I'll be mentioning different tiers, and that's that part 1, 2, and 3. And what we did was we tried to incorporate the requirements from the Phase 2 framework and requirements, and then we developed the Phase 2 RFPs, which you'll hear later, associated contracts. And as identified in the order, projects that are 250 kilowatts or below 250 kilowatts are small projects. And just a matter of terminology, we thought it was helpful is reflected in the order, projects that are between 250 kilowatts and 5 megawatts on Oahu and 2.5 megawatts on Maui and Hawaii Island. We will be referring to that as mid-tier and anything above those limits will be called large projects. But as ordered and as part of this agenda, we'll be focusing on part one only of the small projects. And I'll identify throughout the presentation if it applies to the other tiers. So as mentioned on the agenda, we wanted to capture the subscriber's perspective. And I'm going to go through and highlight some of the changes and improvements that we sought over phase one and considerations in our proposal for phase two. And again, looking for feedback on this. So there's a number of things that we looked at, and if you're familiar with phase one, we have a provision in there for subscriber eligibility, and that was that subscriber has not received a service disconnection notice in the past 12 months, and that could be for something like non-payment. And we started off creating the tariff by looking at Rule 26 for phase one. And given the economic conditions and that we're also incorporating LMI, we didn't want to create a barrier. We wanted to open it up for subscribers, especially those in need. And so we are now proposing that for non-LMI customers that there's a 2-year period where we're not going to require this no service disconnection notice. And then for LMI customers, we're proposing to completely remove that requirement. And we really feel that this is a win-win situation for all. There was consideration that you may have some higher risk subscribers in a project. And what we are offering in addition to this is that we can still, like if a subscriber organization wants to have that as part of their business model, they can still require a 12 months of no service disconnections. And one of the things we'll point out later is that we have gone live with our CBRE portal. It went live this past Friday, and that does have the capability to automatically query Hawaiian Electric's backend system. So although we're not going to be requiring this check, it's an option for subscriber organizations to use. And that goes into Act 100 and the PUC's objective of having different models. So we're giving a choice for subscriber organizations. On the next slide is also about removing barriers and providing access to renewable energy. And this does apply to all tiers in that we've put in a reservation of 40% of a facility's capacity has to be for residential customers. In addition to that, we have a requirement for a minimum of 4 subscribers. And just to note that that was also a program element in phase one, the minimum of 4 subscribers. But we've added this reserve 40% capacity, and that was also a decision that we considered many factors on. And I think when it came down to it, it just came back to the PUC principles and the Act 100 objectives. And what we wanted to do is have some kind of mechanism that we would ensure that residential customers were able to participate. And in the bottom right-hand corner, you can see a sort of a continuum chart. And this graphically illustrates what we were considering. And I think just from the rules itself, it's pretty obvious that this would remove the barrier and create access for residential customers. But we saw a broader opportunity. And in the continuum diagram, which really isn't like a one answer thing. There's many, many different answers. And so we're just kind of showing you what we were thinking. But I think on one side of the spectrum on the right side is an opportunity that given COVID-19 economic recovery and our goals for CBRE, that we can create an attractive market for subscriber organizations with competitive pricing if we're able to have a situation where we would have 100% residential customers in facilities. And that's what we're trying to illustrate, that we think all of these goals kind of go hand in hand, and that by helping out that much needed market with the residential subscribers, that can help foster a broader CBRE market as a whole. So we didn't intend this to be sort of burdensome, and there wasn't a sort of like a incentive for this in the framework. So we felt that it needed to be in there somewhere, and so our proposal includes this 40% subscriber, residential subscriber requirement.
And Mark, sorry to jump in, but just want to clarify on that. When you were explaining the continuum, the 100% would be on the left side, yeah, of residential.
Oh, yeah, apologize.
That's okay.
One of the other considerations that we had is, and this was part of the order, was the type of technologies that we would have in this program. And in the order, it said that it would be open to all RPS eligible generation. So like in the previous slide, we have a continuum diagram, and we weighed two factors: was speed of market development, and then whether or not we would open up to more renewable energy technologies. And really our reasoning kind of slid over to speed of market development, because especially for small projects, we realized that the Commission had put that in a first set of projects that they need to go out to serve that underserved market. So in that theme, we wanted to go with proven technologies, and that's photovoltaic, storage, and wind generation. So specific to small projects, the tariff was written with these technologies in mind, and with the hope that these technologies would get projects to market sooner, being smart about how we use the available capacity, and potentially reducing construction and performance risks by using these proven technologies. Next is, again, from a subscriber perspective, and I think this would apply to all tiers, is how are they going to overcome any barriers to subscribing to a facility? And I think it's identified in the order, as I mentioned, for on-bill repayment, which the companies has a mechanism that went live already to facilitate that, and financing options. So we are looking into this, and I think it was identified through the CBRE docket, and I've seen it elsewhere, is using the GEMS fee to facilitate loans for this, and that's something that we continue to seek to partner with HGIA, and they also have a GEMS for CBRE program that was mentioned in the most recent quarterly report. So using these available means to get access to subscribers will definitely be a part of this Phase 2 program. Okay, just shifting gears a little bit, I'd like to talk about what we want to do for subscriber organizations, and really try to get from their perspective what would be helpful to get them to be successful in this program. And again, we seek feedback on this, continued feedback, and getting subscriber organizations to participate. If they're successful, the program's successful. So this is an area that Hawaiian Electric is very motivated to create an environment where this will thrive. So a number of different considerations and objectives for subscriber organizations is, and I think we've seen it in Phase 1, is reducing the cost of interconnections. And we've seen this identified. We've heard from subscriber organizations, particularly on Oahu, that it's expensive and the process could be improved. So in the Phase 2, and this is specifically for small projects, which is for Oahu, Maui, and Hawaii Island, is that we looked into an expedited review, interconnection review for small projects. And what we're proposing is that the interconnection requirement study we've been able to get that down from 150 calendar days to 90 days, so a shorter period of time. The other thing is that if the facility is served by a dedicated transformer, and as long as that circuit has available hosting capacity, we can not require an IRS for that situation. And as a result, it should have some cost savings to the subscriber organization. And then just also to note, in terms of the process, we've proposed a draft in our latest filing, but it's a draft of a standardized single line diagram as part of the interconnection requirements, because right now we pretty much get a variety of different single line diagrams, and there may be a development and cost savings to that subscriber organizations that they have something standard that is there. And I think I just saw a question pop up on what is residential, and in the tariff we've identified residential as being customers that have residential rates. In terms of the interconnection process, we have identified these opportunities. Obviously, there's other things that could be done, and we're continuing to look at that. One of those is trying to refine the interconnection requirements for things like communications and control, and right-sizing that for CBRE small projects. Okay, the next slide, and again, this was reflective in the order that we look for non-wires alternatives and grid services, and we completely agree that this should be a component of CBRE, and we align this with the objective of also reducing costs and providing economic options for participants and subscriber organizations. And we did have a small section in the tariff where we've identified for small projects that they can participate in these opportunities. It is ongoing in another docket, another proceeding, and opportunities are being developed. But once defined, we will be encouraging projects in CBRE to participate, and for subscriber organizations to take advantage. And just to note there that we want to make sure that these opportunities are known and available. So we have different means to do that, whether on our company website or a location value maps tool to make that visible for potential subscriber organizations. And then on the bullet point on the bottom, we have reduced the application fees from $1,000 to $250 non-refundable. The application fees is something that we had in there just to make sure we have viable applications. In the interest of reducing costs for subscriber organizations, we decided to make that $250. Okay, one other element of CBRE, and it's a challenge, I think, for subscriber organizations to manage subscribers. And I think that there's some things that we can do to help improve that. And one of those is the concept of transfers. So in phase one, there is an ability for subscribers to transfer their subscriptions, but they have the ability to do partial transfers. And this is actually something that we did build into our CBRE portal, has that capability. But there is a number of steps that subscriber organizations have to do to help manage these partial transfers. So kind of understanding what a subscriber organization's perspective is, we've removed the partial transfer and have made that only a whole transfer for what has been identified as the pay upfront model. The other model that was identified, and it's kind of broken out in the tariff, is the pay-as-you-go model. And so this is the model that we really hope will help our low and moderate income and moderate income customers to be able to obtain a CBRE subscription. And because pay-as-you-go model is sort of like an ongoing subscription, we didn't think that should be a transferable interest. It's a little bit different than a pay-upfront model. So a pay-as-you-go is in the tariff put as non-transferable, but the subscriber would still be able to, of course, transfer that subscription back to the subscriber organization or another member of the household, as long as it's a single metered household to another household member. And as mentioned, the CBRE portal has a capability. It has been developed with the pay-as-you-go and the pay-upfront models in mind. But we really see this as an opportunity so that we can enable small projects to manage their facilities without all the overheads and complications, trying to clear that barrier. So the CBRE portal has a number of automations and tools in there that would make it easier for subscriber organizations, small projects, to check the subscriber status, utilize our billing interface, versus creating some infrastructure on their own or doing things manually. Next slide is about providing flexibility. And this is something that I think is an opportunity for all tiers in CBRE. So the first one there is escrow account options. And in the framework for CBRE, all payments and deposits are put in an escrow account. And we've gotten feedback on that and thought that it might be good to allow subscriber organizations to have proposed alternatives for escrow accounts, as long as it's approved by the independent observer. And then, as mentioned, we have identified the pay-as-you-go and pay-upfront business model, and that's part of the CBRE portal. But we also didn't put in the tariff any language to prohibit any other business models. And we just wanted to point that out because it goes back to the theme for the PUC objectives and Act 100 that we want to see a diversity in the program. So maybe this is an area where we would also like to get some feedback of what subscriber organizations are thinking. But that is something that we definitely wanted to provide flexibility for the subscriber organizations. Okay, and then the last thing that we had for subscriber organizations is streamlining administrative processes. So one of the things that we do is we do an initial application review when subscriber organizations submit those. Then subsequently goes to the mandated Rule 14H completeness review. And as we're looking at the process, and in the tariff, we have a number of things that we check. A lot of those are very similar to Rule 14H. So we found a process of improvement where we can just combine those two processes and do them together while keeping it set to the Rule 14H 15 days completeness review timeline. So that would result in a quicker turnaround for a subscriber organization application, but also allow us to just get information one time and not have multiple revisions to the application, kind of doing it all up front. So it was a simple change, but I think something that will have a big impact in our administrative process. And we did look at other things just in terms of providing subscriber organizations a little more time to get their enrollment notifications into the CBRE portal and other items like that. But those are relatively minor compared to this one. Okay, that wraps it up for the subscriber organization perspectives and objectives. And the last portion of this is other policy objectives. So these were things that we identified looking through the framework and the tariffs and the DNO, and really looking for opportunities where we can speed up CBRE projects for subscribers to participate, and as we mentioned before, creating more economic opportunities. So for the policy section, we have sort of 3 objectives, and I think they all go hand in hand. So what we've identified and what's in the proposed tariff is project viability. And I think this was maybe a lesson learned that we've seen in previous programs, but really want to make sure that subscriber organizations submit applications for projects that are going to be successful. And honestly, we have seen some applications fall out, and we want to try to put something in the policy so that we avoid that situation. And even further, that we have projects that are going to come to market faster. So we kind of clarify some of the issues that we're having up front in the application process, and then it should result in a smoother transition into the interconnection to our grid. And by doing this, we'll provide faster access for our customers. And I identified, I think it was in a previous CBRE technical conference, was that site control was sort of a recurring issue. And so like the stage 1 and 2 RFPs, which we'll touch on a little bit later, there are some stronger site control requirements that we've put into the tariff. And it's a little bit similar, like types of documentation, letter of intent, but the 2 key things is that we want to make sure that these are legally enforceable documents and that they're binding documents, so that we can have a little more assurance up front that site control is established and kind of avoid the back and forth that might come in later in the application process. And sort of like site control, there's other things that can be used to demonstrate project viability. So we've identified like having a site plan with the interconnection point, and you can see the other bullet points, the construction plan and so forth. But again, this was a way that we can kind of get ahead of the issues. And further, you know, once we get through all of this in the application process and we sign contracts and project development starts, we wanted an opportunity for the utility to ask questions and identify from the subscriber organization how are things going with the construction milestones, the financing, any land right issues, design and engineering and things of that nature. So we wanted to put that in here in the theme of project viability so that we can ensure that these projects come out to market as quickly as possible. Also on policy, and in the theme of project viability, and this is part of the CBRE framework, but there's a $75 per kilowatt deposit that small projects have to put forth when they put their application in. And this is one of those fees that goes into the escrow account that we talked about earlier. And for a 250 kW project, I mean, that's over $18,000 that has to go up front. And we made considerations because, like we said, we want a diverse marketplace of many different business models and many different CBRE projects. And maybe some of those are like nonprofit organizations where this type of fee may be prohibitive. So we wanted to put in here a provision where that $75 per kW fee can be either waived or reduced by the independent observer for CBRE. And again, this is something that we want to get feedback on. The intent of the $75 kilowatt deposit, I believe, is so that we can make sure that project's complete, because if it were to fall out or terminate, they don't get that deposit back. But if they achieve commercial operations, it's refundable. So it was another policy type thing to ensure project viability. And so there's many different ways to encourage that, and this was one of our suggestions. This is new. So, well, new to small projects, that is. In the mid-tier and large projects, we have in the RFP process, community outreach plan. But sort of in line with our guiding principles, we just found that projects that do this tend to be a little more successful to get that community buy-in and community feedback. And we put another continuum diagram here at the bottom. And really, the two factors that we were kind of weighing is what's the effort to build the plan? Is this, what are we asking the subscriber organizations to submit? And then on the other side of the spectrum, it's your desire to create an attractive market with competitive pricing. So what we came up with is, as you see on the slide, for projects between 100 and 250 kW, that we asked the subscriber organizations to really submit a plan or roadmap on how they intend to engage with communities and stakeholders. And going back to the effort to the plan, we're not asking for like a 10,000-page document and processes and all that. We're looking for a plan, and that can be very simple. But really, what we wanted to drive is for subscriber organizations to realize that, or to appreciate the planning and the effort to reach out to the community and to kind of understand the challenges, especially in Hawaii's environment, that we do get that feedback. So we definitely didn't want this plan to be onerous or burdensome to the subscriber organizations. In fact, we didn't put into the tariff any review or enforcement mechanisms on it. Really, the point was that we want these small projects to be successful, and we wanted some way for subscriber organizations to go through that process to reach out to the community. The next policy type of discussion is around the CCRP, the competitive credit rate procurement model, which, as in the framework in the recent DNO, is that this mechanism is only triggered if we receive more applications than what the location capacity allows. So what this is sort of like a reverse auction, and we like the idea actually because this is a procurement means that can be very quick, create speed to the market, and also have a mechanism to create competitive pricing. So in conjunction with the framework, we thought of some things that may be sort of like implementation challenges. And one of the things that we saw in phase one, as mentioned earlier, is that projects kind of dropped out. And as stated in the CCRP, there is a 4-month window that we receive applications. And if we get to a point where we award out capacity from those applications, and then that 4-month window closes, what happens down the line as we go through the interconnection process and build processes if these projects start to drop out again? And that was counter to the objectives of the program. So we wanted to make sure there was a way to backfill those type of gaps in the capacity. So we're proposing a post-award queue of another 4-month period where for applications that didn't quite make the first 4 months can stay in a queue, and if there's capacity that then later is opened up through that second 4-month window, their application can join the first 4-month queue or application awardees. We put in there that if they did do this, they would have to agree to what available capacity is in there that's available, and they would have to accept the credit rate as determined in the initial 4-month window. So that was the intent. We just wanted to make sure that capacity wasn't lost in that first 4 months. The other thing that we identified is that the capacity awardees must accept their, capacity offer within 10 business days. And we just wanted to make sure that it didn't sit there and would take up capacity that otherwise would be available for other awardees. And we also realized, just through an implementation standpoint, just ranking these, that probably more than one subscriber organization may propose the same discounted credit rate bid. So as a tiebreaker, we plan to use application completeness timestamp to break those ties. And then just for administrative reasons, we are having the discounted credit rate bid be limited to increments of 1/10 of a cent for application. The last slide really covers curtailment. And the way we see this as an objective is really encouraging energy storage. So for phase 2, as noted, there's no compensable curtailment, and there should be no favorable curtailment treatment for small projects. So small project is going to be part of the seniority-based curtailment order. So the newer projects are going to be curtailed first. And we are seeing that. It's a real thing, especially on Maui. During the COVID-19 situation, we're seeing more daytime lows. So all of this is really to encourage that subscriber organizations are directed towards energy storage so that they will be paid for the energy delivered to the grid. So as long as they can store that energy, they wouldn't be losing out if they were curtailed. But it kind of goes beyond that too. By having energy storage, it also enables projects to participate in incentivized grid services. So it kind of goes hand in hand. So we are completely in agreement with the curtailment framework, and really see this as an opportunity to create more economic opportunities for subscriber organizations and subscribers. And that concludes the items that we had for the tariff and many of the improvements that we wanted to make. Just to end, some of the big objectives that we were trying to achieve is getting speed to market, having viable projects, and creating a strong CBRE marketplace that creates economic opportunities for all parties. And with that, I would like to turn it back over for small project Q&A. And Micah, I wasn't sure if you had anything to introduce for this section. But,
no, the only thing I wanted to go over very briefly is how we're going to handle questions. I see we've already gotten a few that are in the chat feature. Happy to see that people are actively engaging in this. But for the sake, I think, of getting everybody a good chance to be heard, I'd like to try and use the hand raising feature. So if you're not familiar with that, under the participants section, you should see your name and a little hand. If you float your mouse over that hand and click on it, it'll say raise hand, and then we'll have Nikki sort of call out folks in order. We'd like to get to stakeholder questions first, but hopefully there'll be time for commission questions as well. But I would say if you have questions as we go, feel free to put them in the chat. And if any of the folks on Hawaiian Electric's and as you already have done, see a quick answer to those questions, feel free to use the chat feature. So please start raising your hands if you have questions, and then Nikki, please just call out folks in order.
No questions, anyone? Oh, okay. We have a question from Jody Alioni. Sorry if I mispronounced that. And then next up we have Glenn Yamasaki.
I have a simple question on what the cost for the IRS is intended to be for the smaller projects.
Hi, Jody. So this is Mark Asano. We didn't contemplate like a fixed cost or standardized cost of the IRS within the tariff, but we don't expect the IRS. We expect the IRS to be pretty simple and straightforward for projects 250 kW and below. and hopefully a lot of these projects don't even require IRS per the process that we had laid out for the interconnection. I don't expect that we would need to study more than looking at some steady state issues within the IRS.
One of the projects I was involved with was a small project in the 200 kW range, and it was like $35,000 for the study, which pretty much put them to a halt. So it doesn't seem like a lot for big projects, but it definitely is an issue for small projects.
Yeah, I think we would. I'm not familiar with all the details of that project, but I think we would. We are encouraging projects to go on circuits below hosting or with available hosting capacity, and that would, for what Mark had laid out, that would help to avoid an IRS. Certainly, we would want to try to improve on that $35,000 IRS price.
Okay. Thank you.
Next, we have Glenn Yamasaki, and then after that, Ai Moriwaki.
Oh, hi, Mark. Glenn Yamasaki here. I have a question regarding the discounted credit rate bid, and maybe I missed it in your presentation, but could you redefine that and also talk about the process that you would go through or a subscriber organization would go through in providing that discounted rate?
Yeah, so through the, now this is if, would only be triggered if we exceeded the program capacity. So
right.
if we got more, yeah. So in your application, you would submit a bid somewhere outside of the 15 cents on Oahu, so say you put 12 cents in, and that was your bid. We would collect those applications and bids during a 4-month process, and through that we'll actually be checking it, doing the completeness review, and other items that we discussed in the presentation. But at the end of that 4 months, then we're going to rank all of those bids based on the bid allocation. So the lower bids are going to be given a higher ranking. So they'll float up to the top, and then we will look at the amount of available capacity, and we'll try to fit in as many projects in there as we can. But because we've exceeded the capacity, there's going to be some folks that didn't make it. So in that case, real quick, there could be a gap in there. So we may ask one of the last, people who got, or one of the first people that cut off if they'd be willing to reduce their project size to fit in the available capacity. But once we have that ranking, then we'll sort of resort that from with the highest credit rate in there, and then that would be the credit rate for that that sort of 4-month procurement period that all the bidders would have to agree to.
And I just have a follow-up question. So that credit rate is what the utility is going to credit the subscriber, right?
Yeah, and also what you get for unsubscribed energy. So if
right.
you don't
so
have,
from the subscriber's perspective, especially the low to moderate income folks, wouldn't they prefer to have a higher credit rate? I mean, I see that as a disadvantage then.
We do have the ability for small projects, or it's not limited to LMI, but we have different provisions for LMI projects through the RFP process, so that may be another product model to use to address LMI.
Okay. Thank you.
But yeah, definitely want to have a competitive marketplace for credit rates. And I think that was just the intent for this model.
Yeah, so just clarifying that the model and the way it's set up, the credit rate is almost like an IPP pricing and that's being paid to, I mean, it's equivalent to being paid to the subscriber. And so whatever we pay is being paid by all customers. So that's why we want to make sure that pricing is a market price to the extent possible, with whatever, you know, adders are needed, because it's CBRE to administer the program. And that amount will reduce the retail cost to the customer. And so depending on who the SO is and how they want to design the offering, they have other levers where they can provide more or less compensation through other components of their model.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. Up next we have I Moriwake and then Will Geese.
Isaac, I think you might be muted. If you have been talking, we have not yet been able to hear you.
Oh, thank you. Oh my gosh, basics, folks.
No worries.
Moriwake, Earth Justice, on behalf of HSCA, party in this docket. I have a fair list of questions that I've actually collected from consultation with members and stakeholders as well, but I'll just take them one at a time, and also want to give everyone an opportunity. Real quick, first of all, I just want to observe with regards to this new requirement of a 40% residential customer quota. So, I mean, just to clarify for everyone, this is new, and it's essentially replacing what the PUC previously ordered of, I guess, at least 40% of individual subscriptions must be below 50 kW. That was, you know, the previous order. You know, I don't know. I don't know if the utility has the latitude here to be making these types of, you know, major sort of course corrections. In any event, we can discuss it. Certainly, stakeholders and HSCA have cautioned against those kinds of quotas just standing alone, just adding more and more costs and burdens and requirements. And instead, we proposed, you know, the approach of sort of adders in order to incentivize these types of policy priorities. And we cited Minnesota as an example. So that's just raising a flag. We totally support the principle and the purpose, but again, I don't know if quotas is the best way, or just adding quotas is the best way to address this. My question for now has to go with this pay-as-you-go concept. We really support that, and we suggested that as well. But first of all, we were wondering why it wouldn't be transferable, and what's the rationale behind that? Is it some kind of simplicity consideration? I think, you know, the purpose of these types of on-bill arrangements is that they are transferable, and you know, that's the whole merit of those. So maybe we'll just start with that question.
Okay. For the pay-as-you-go model, it is simpler, like we said with the pay-upfront models, but the just the concept of it being as pay-as-you-go, we just felt that because you're not buying your interest all up front, that it just makes it a little trickier to then transfer that to another subscriber. And
right, if I could just interject, this is Kevin Oda from Hawaiian Electric. Mark, yeah, the idea of a pay-as-you-go model is a subscription. So it's as you pay, and as you know, the way it's described, pay as you go. So if you don't want to participate anymore, the idea is to just, you know, cancel your subscription. You know, it's like a transfer, doesn't really, it just adds administrative burdens to the SO, and also to the administrator in making sure, that how the transfer is accomplished, and when is it accomplished, mid-billing types of transfers, those kind of things all add administrative costs both to the SO and the administrator. And so since it is a pay-as-you-go type of subscription thing, the easier way to go about it is to just cancel the subscription, and then if somebody new wants to come in, they can just sign up for another subscription.
Okay. I mean, if the SO is okay with such a transfer, and I don't see the interest in prohibiting it from the utility side. But in any event, I mean, I think you recognize that one of the benefits of a pay-as-you-go model is that it kind of like, well, in the on-bill context, it follows the meter or whatever, and so someone who buys the premises or a new renter that moves in could benefit from that arrangement if they want to.
Right, but contrary to kind of like a pay-as-you-pay upfront type of model, where I could see, that's really a concern and an interest that needs to be, I think, protected. Pay-as-you-go model, that what if you don't pay, then you just cancel. There's no enduring interest, I think, that you require. So I think if you do end up selling the home or whatever, the new owner can just come in and purchase their own subscription. But we can look at that, and if like you said, if the SO is okay with it, and we can handle it administratively, I don't see how. I'm not saying that we are wedded to all of these things, and as I think Mark noted, that we are looking to comments and feedback from stakeholders. So, we can look at that if that is a concern.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, up next we have Will Geese, and then after him we'll have Richard Walsgrove.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yep.
I have several questions, but I'll ask maybe one and then circle back after other people ask theirs. But this one's more about the community outreach and communications plan. So I asked this question in the chat, but it seems, I guess I'm wondering what the justification for this is. One, is this applicable to medium and large projects? I assume it is, because this is the small projects Q&A. And two, kind of what is the reasoning behind this plan? My comparison in the way that I think about this is, if like a commercial business like Walmart or something that when it builds, someone would have a community outreach plan in like a normal commercial development scenario. And so if smaller projects themselves have slimmer margins and might be harder to develop, it seems like this might be a little bit of an added cost onto that project, as opposed to maybe being more applicable for larger size projects. So maybe you can talk a little bit more about that. And then if this isn't a hard requirement, is the intention to include it in the tariff itself? And what is the reasoning behind that? So kind of a compound question about community outreach.
Hi, this is Becca Day of Matsushima from Hawaiian Electric. So this is a requirement. Sorry, can you hear me? Okay, this is a requirement in the tariff. I wanted to point out though, it doesn't apply to all small projects. If you read the tariff that we proposed, it applies to projects between 100 kilowatts and 250 kilowatts. And the thought being that those projects are large enough that they would be seen to the community, and the community might have questions about them. And the requirement is really low here for these small projects. If you read the tariff, it requires a community outreach plan that identifies efforts the subscriber organization will make to provide the community within a 1 mile radius of the project boundaries with information regarding the project, including, project description, benefits, government approvals, and the development process. So it's not a very expensive requirement. It would apply to only the larger size, end of the small projects. And it's really to the developers and the subscriber organizations benefit to do this, because we have seen, community input and feedback to projects has been one of the reasons that those projects have not been successful. So even in, in our smaller projects such as FIT, we've seen that. So the intent is really to just make sure the community is informed, that they understand what the project is, but it's a pretty low bar if you read the requirement, and it is just for those projects we felt would be, large and noticeable in the community on the larger end of the scale. And to your question about does it apply to the mid-tier and large projects, those projects have a much more stringent community outreach requirement, and those are set forth in the RFP documents that we filed and are more in line with what we require in our current RFPs.
Okay, thanks. I guess it just surprises me that are there specific projects that you can point to that have had pushback under the 250 kilowatt threshold as a reasoning for this? I guess, I don't know. I'm all for community outreach and like conceptually, but it just seems like there's quite a few 50 kilowatt projects that go up normally and don't have a lot of community outreach. And these aren't really the projects that you read about in the news. Obviously, there's wind projects and stuff that we're all aware of that are huge, or very, very large solar farms above a megawatt that get built that have community pushback. And I understand the reasoning for that. It just seems, I don't know.
There are projects.
It's just a surprising requirement.
There's one, a PUC complaint for one in particular that I can think of on the Big Island and Ocean View for small FIT projects that were, relatively very small in size. So we have seen community, feedback that has for these small projects, and so really, like I said, if you read the requirement, I think you will find that, and there's also been a project on Oahu. I think you'll find that it's not a very time-consuming or expensive requirement, but really will be super beneficial to the developer to ensure the community is aware, ensure the community knows the benefits of the project. I would think all developers would want to really, as a company, we really highly find it important that the community is a part of the process, that they're involved, that they're engaged, and that they're informed. And I think that all developers should want to take that aspect and that perspective as well. And it'll help, in my opinion, the projects go more smoothly, so that they don't just see a large, 250 kilowatt project being developed and wonder, hey, what's going on there? And then start asking questions and wanting to know why they weren't informed.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, up next we have Richard Walsgrove, and then we'll have Kylie Cruz after that.
Thank you very much. I have no indication of whether or not I can be heard right now. And I can't see everybody, so hold on a second. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
I can see.
We can hear you.
Great, thank you. I just have a quick question. With this effort going into removing barriers, I know that the deposit framework was adopted from the original commission framework way back when, the $75 deposit. But I'm wondering if any consideration has been given to allowing subscriber organizations on these small projects to apply that deposit to interconnection fees. so maybe dealing with the sort of need to have people fully in on one hand, but also partially addressing Jody's concern about the interconnection costs for small projects on the other. Was that given any consideration?
This is Mark. Not to my knowledge specifically, but I think that's a intriguing idea that we appreciate his feedback, and something that we will definitely consider applying that fee to any interconnection costs.
Thanks.
Okay, up next we have Kylie Cruz and then Isaac Moriwaki.
Sure, thank you. This is Kylie Wager Cruz on behalf of HSEA as well. And I'm just echoing what Isaac said earlier about supporting the concept of pay in general, of pay as you go. And I'm wondering if that will also be available for mid-size and large projects. And I'm just going to sneak one really hopefully straightforward question in addition to that, which is how will developers know what the available hosting capacity is on each circuit?
I think in terms of the hosting capacity question, we are encouraging the prospective subscriber organizations to use the LVM.
Thanks, Mark. And then with respect to the first question about making pay-as-you-go available to mid and large size projects.
Sure. Hi, Kylie. This is Christian Call from Hawaii Electric. I can answer that. For the larger projects, that's those subscriber, what's available to the subscribers will be available for both the small and the large project.
So you, Greg, so you mean that you're talking about not the large of the small, but the actual like mid-size and large projects that will be subject to the competitive bidding process?
Right, that's a subscriber, something that's available to subscribers, so that's available to both subscribers into small projects and subscribers into mid-size or larger projects.
Thank you.
Okay, up next we have Isaac Moriwaki again, and then after that, Nick Azari.
Thank you. I had a question regarding the proposal to extend the time to hold a queue, particularly in when the competitive bidding process kicks in, the CCRP. So I understand there's an additional 4 months that's going to be provided, but my question is, am I correctly understanding that that's just kind of a limited window and sort of like the initial stage, still while we're sorting out the bidding and initial fallout? I mean, why wouldn't we maintain a queue for longer to deal with dropouts throughout the development process, things like that? And I think we should also apply a queue to a non-CCRP situation too. I'm understanding that there was some difficulty in phase 1 where maybe a developer grabbed a lot of queue space and then fell out or whatever, and then people sort of saw the full program and didn't bother getting in time, and then they were gone or whatever. So I think a queue is exactly designed to address that type of situation. And so why wouldn't we just hold a queue for, whether it's CCRP or regular non-CCRP, and then, throughout the program? I raised these questions in the chat, so but yeah, wanted to voice them here out loud.
Thank you, Isaac, for those questions. And it kind of hit it. We did make considerations on how long the post-award queue should be. I think what it came down to it is we wanted to make sure that in the theme of speed to market, that we didn't let these projects kind of have a, indefinite queue. We wanted to try to put some sort of timeline around it. But we're definitely open to feedback. I think that's with 4 months is what we came up with, but we definitely want to hear from others on what may be a more reasonable time frame on that.
Yeah, speed to market's good. Fully support that. And then I think these requirements like site control and stuff is going to help along those lines to make sure serious projects come into the queue in the first place. But I think just to have a backup and then sort of allow you to gauge sort of total market interest or whatever. I don't see the downside to having a reserve queue to include potential dropouts as well.
Yep. Yep. Understood. We also had, there'll be a second procurement, another 4-month period in tranche 2, so we had that in mind as well. Maybe an adjustment can be made for that second procurement period, but understand the concerns and definitely want to have the discussion to come up with something.
Okay, I think we have Nick Azari up next and then Robert Harris.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes. We can hear you.
Yeah, okay, great. I'm just following up on the question that Kylie asked about how do we find out the hosting capacity of the power lines, and the answer was you should utilize LVM. And based on my experience, LVM is quite outdated and doesn't reflect the real hosting capacity of the lines. Is there anything new that I don't know, or do you have any other approaches that we should use?
Yeah, Nick, I'm not sure if there's something specific you're referring to, but we do rely on the LVM for our projects as we do our technical review process for smaller type of projects on the distribution system.
So the LVM is updated. I mean, how often do you update that?
So the hosting capacity, so the amount of projects on a given circuit is updated nightly based on applications that we're intaking, and then the hosting capacity value normally gets updated annually or so.
Annually? So I mean, having the hosting capacity not updated for a year, that doesn't reflect.
So like I said, we update the amount of projects or systems on a given circuit, so that's taken into account.
I think you understand why it's important. We as developers need to know where these capacities are, and so we can go out there and lease land and start developing the project. I feel like right now at this time, we are pretty much in dark about knowing what the capacities are.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm not sure if there's a specific example you're speaking to, but we do update the database daily with the projects that are interconnecting to that circuit, and that is then reconciled against the hosting capacity.
Yeah, I can at least use a couple of examples that the RVM is not reflecting what the hosting capacity is. So, I mean, I don't want to take everybody's time by going through that, but I can do that offline if you want.
Okay, yeah, that would be good.
Okay, and then finally we have Robert Harris as our last question.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. Perhaps following up on the last question, particularly on Molokai and Lanai, it seems like hosting capacity is extremely constrained. For example, I don't think a single self-supply or smart export tariff proposal has been accepted on those islands. Is there any view onto how to provide transparency about where projects might be allowed, particularly in those unique circumstances, and or a plan to address the hosting capacity constraints on those islands to allow developers to actually even consider moving forward in projects?
Yeah, so Robert, that first part of the question I can't really speak to. I'm not sure if that's correct or not, but in terms of the CBRE proposal, the Molokai and Lanai are not going to be part of the small projects. And those are not, you know, there's no option there for the less than 250 kW. So the way that it's being taken care of, and I think Greg or Becca will get into that a little bit later, you know, we are requiring storage, I believe, for those projects on Molokai and Lanai.
I guess, though, I mean, the same questions remain even for larger projects, though. I mean, what's the point of pursuing the project if it seems like those projects won't be approved through the interconnection process?
So Robert, this is Becca. As part of the RFP process, you know, we lay out that you can contact the utility with your proposed location, and we can provide you further information regarding, you know, what type of hosting capacity may be available for the interconnection that you're proposing. For Lanai, we're only allowing projects in one location at one site, so that's pretty set. But for the other islands, the RFPs lay out a process and highly encourage the developers to contact the utility during the proposal development stage.
Okay, so thanks everybody for all of the questions. I wanted to let folks know that although we're going to be moving on to the next presentation shortly, if you do have other questions, we would like to make sure you all get a chance to have those answered before the deadline to file comments. So if you have questions that have not yet been answered, either give it a shot in later Q&A sessions, or you can email the commission at puc.comments@hawaii.gov. Again, puc.comments@hawaii.gov, and we'll forward those along to the companies. I'll put that up at the end so you can all see that. But in the interest of time and keeping us as close to on schedule as we can, I think we should move on to the next set of presentations. So I'm not sure who on Hawaiian Electric's end is up next.
Hi, Mike. It's Greg Shimoka. I'm going to get my part of the slides up here.
Great. So this will be on the LMI RFPs.
Yeah. Okay. Can everybody see that now?
We can see it, but it's a little small, Greg. Only on
Yeah,
half.
can you maximize your screen, Greg?
There you go.
Okay. Okay. How's that?
Looks good.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, commissioners, commission staff, and stakeholders for participating this morning and the opportunity to present today. My name is Greg Shimokawa, and I'm the manager of energy procurement at Hawaiian Electric. So for this part of the presentation, I'll be going over the RFPs for the low and moderate income customers. So going to the agenda for today, I just wanted to start with a quick overview of what we're doing with the LMI RFPs. Talk specifically a little bit about the direction given by the Commission through the order, and then some details about the RFPs themselves and the contracts, and then finally the timeline for all of this to happen. So just to start, just to kind of level set everyone, the form of the RFPs for these CBRE projects will closely follow the recently completed successful stage 1 and stage 2 renewable dispatchable generation RFPs that took place in 2018 and 2019 into this year. So the order from the Commission, directed the majority of the capacity for CBRE to be sought through competitive bidding. So that's the focus of these RFPs. So there will be RFPs across all 5 islands, and in terms of the LMI specific RFPs, there'll be ones each on Oahu, Maui, and Hawaii Island. So moving to the guidance from the Commission, utilizing RFPs is consistent with the company's suggestion to allow the market to determine appropriate pricing levels to develop a robust CBRE market for customers. So, per the order, we are targeting in these RFPs a minimum of 1 project per island, but depending on what the response is, the Commission does have discretion to approve more projects, if they show benefit to customers. Consistent with the order, we are going to be using the renewable dispatchable generation PPA model. Then we're going to also, through the evaluation of the RFP proposals, we'll look to reward projects or favor projects who are offering to be able to help participate in future grid services programs, or to serve as non-wires alternatives, or otherwise offer community resilience benefits. And then finally, per the order, the companies may propose a utility solution, if there's the event where there are no successful competitive LMI RFP bids. So our interpretation of that is that the company will not submit self-build proposals into these RFPs, and that's reflected in the draft that we filed a few weeks ago, and then only in the case where the evaluation shows that there's nothing successful, nothing beneficial from third-party bidders, that we would go and look at a utility solution at that point. So just wanted to confirm and make sure that that's the understanding of everyone here. And then finally, going back to the filing from July 9th, what the company filed was the draft Maui LMI RFP as a representative draft for all 3 islands. So not to overwhelm with generally identical information, we wanted that as a template for everyone to review and to comment on. So next, going quickly, consistent with what the company proposed and what the Commission approved, the definition for LMI is based on what the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development's definition is. And there's benefits that we noted about that. Just that that's a readily accessible and a widely used definition, and and that those limits are available easily for public viewing. And then just for these RFPs, just 100% of the capacity of each of these projects selected will be reserved for LMI customers. So that subscriber organizations do take that into account as they're preparing their proposals that they'll need to be able to outreach to and to keep LMI subscribers. Then I'll just note, that in the non-LMI specific RFPs for Molokai and Lanai, that we'll talk about a little later this morning, and then for the future, non-LMI RFPs for Oahu, Maui, and Hawaii Island that we're not talking about today. Reserving capacity for LMI customers is encouraged but not required. So through evaluation, we'll encourage greater availability for LMI subscribers, but that wouldn't be required in those other RFPs. So because there is going to be capacity reserved for the LMI customers, 100% in these RFPs, but whatever developed subscriber organizations propose in the non-LMI RFPs, and we are doing verification of LMI eligibility to prevent gaming. That was something that was in the order as well. So the idea is that we would check eligibility when subscribers sign up, but the subscriber organization would check eligibility when they're signing up, and that verification would happen between the subscriber organization and the customer at the time of enrollment. So that would be something done at the subscriber organization's cost. Just a few details on that. We proposed in the tariff an LMI subscriber affidavit. We've talked about potentially using third-party verification to verify status, and then that self-verification would be confirmed through that subscriber affidavit that we proposed. And then for these dedicated LMI projects, subscribers who fail the verification can be removed, and there's a prohibition for reapplying to CBRE projects for a period of time. That's just to make sure that this capacity and this opportunity is available for customers who truly are LMI qualified. But then I do want to note that if there's a change in status to a duly qualified LMI customer, there wouldn't be a future disqualification if there's a change in circumstances, either through household size or through income change. The idea is not to penalize a LMI subscriber who is somehow no longer qualified if they've already been in and qualified legitimately initially. And then on the subscriber organization side, so there will be a pricing adjustment to what's paid to the subscriber organization if the amount of LMI that they've committed to is not met. And so there will be grace periods to reaching 100% in these LMI for these 100% LMI projects. Then after that grace period, the unsubscribed compensation will be subject to pricing adjustments. But then our intent really is to make sure that subscriber bill credits are not impacted by any of these pricing adjustments to the payment that's made to the subscriber organization. And not to get into too many of the details here, that they're in the tariff, but just in terms of concept, that's our that's the proposal. So moving on to specifications, for these LMI RFPs. First, just to note, what's the same for all islands? So what will look the same from the draft Maui RFP that we filed in, and what it'll look like for Oahu and Hawaii Island. In terms of size, there's no sizing cap for the projects up to the target capacities for each island, but there will be limitations based on what kind of interconnection is being proposed to be allowed here. In terms of technology, similar to what was discussed for the smaller projects earlier, we feel that mature technologies have the greatest ability to reach commercial operations as soon as possible. And so in the interest of speedy market development, we're limiting to PV and wind, and paired with storage as encouraging that or requiring that as appropriate. But for these LMI RFPs, we're not requiring storage, just encouraging. Something just to note, just in our experience in stage 1 and stage 2 of the renewable dispatchable RFPs, our final award groups were made up of only PV or PV and BESS PV and storage projects. So that gives us some indication, we think of what types of technology we would see here. And because these are projects that have a strong customer impact to the subscribers, we want to make sure to the best that we can that we limit construction and execution risk. Going to the guaranteed commercial operations date, in the RFP draft that we submitted, we did not include a specific date for an outside date for GCOD. I think that was an oversight in our draft, but what we're proposing to add is a December 31st, 2025 date for that. That strikes the balance for enough time to develop and put together a program, but not to be too far out in the future to get projects and customers being served by these CBRE projects. In terms of available sites for these 3 RFPs on these 3 islands, the sites would be at the developer's selection and option. We do have land RFI that we went out for, and we'll discuss in a later slide here. But that can be a resource in terms of project siting. And then in terms of proposal variations, in the stage 1 and stage 2 RFPs, we had, I think, up to 4 variations of a single proposal for a single proposal fee allowed. And just to expedite the review process, we're proposing here to lower that to 2 variations per proposal, being that these are generally simpler projects on the smaller side. We thought that would help to speed review of the RFP proposals a little bit. And then moving on to what's different across the 3 islands here, consistent with the fee structure for the small projects increased to a CBRE, and recognizing the shared interest in facilitating successful projects, we're proposing to reduce the amount of fees for these LMI projects by 50%. So, I know we haven't filed the draft RFPs for the non-LMI for these islands, but looking at a rate at between $1,000 to $5,000 for Oahu projects, depending on site, and then $1,000 for Maui and Hawaii Island. And just to compare, stage 1 and stage 2 proposal fees were $10,000 for all project proposals of all sizes. The ongoing Molokai and Lanai RFPs, that we went out with late in 2019, those fees were set at $5,000. So I think we thought this was a reasonable amount to go out with. So just to give some a little bit more color to the Oahu fee, that $1,000 would be for projects between 250 kW and 2.5 megawatts. Projects in the middle tier between 2.5 megawatts and yeah, it would be 2,500, and the large projects $5,000. So then I go into interconnection. What the companies are proposing here for these RFPs is to limit interconnection to distribution circuits only. So for Oahu, that would be 25 kV and below, and on the other islands it would be 12 kV and below. And then on Oahu, we'd also allow interconnection at the 46 kV subtransmission level. This is something that we thought would simplify and streamline the interconnection process that we talked about a little bit before, reduce some of the execution risk, and then for these distribution circuit interconnections for all islands, we would limit the size of those interconnections to 3 megawatts. So, again, this is something that we thought would reduce the risk of technical issues following the project, and then to also ensure that CBRE projects do not take up the majority of available hosting capacity on a particular circuit, to leave room for other future customer programs or customer systems. And then again, limiting the project sizes this way will increase we think it'll increase the total number of CBRE projects that can be selected, and help to ensure a more robust market, and provide a little bit more diversity, geographic diversity, and those things all help to create a more resilient system. So like I mentioned before, so we did offer reissue a land RFI. So after the stage 2 projects were selected back in the beginning of May, we issued a new land RFI in June, in part to assist with the CBRE effort. As with the original land RFI that was issued back in 2017, one of the goals is to improve the likelihood of successful project development. Project development through helping to promote successful site discovery. This initiative is similar to what was issued in 2017, seeking information about potential locations, on Oahu, Hawaii Island, Maui, and Molokai. But one of the main differences here is we also sought information for rooftop owners, large rooftop owners, and parking lots. Those things that could be appropriate for smaller projects like CBRE projects, and especially these LMI projects. So that period for the second land RFI, which was issued on June 15th, closed on July 12th, and just some rough numbers. We did get close to 200 TMK parcels and about 90,000 acres identified through that process. So some of that was renewal, reaffirmation of land that was identified through the first land RFI, and some of this was new sites. So working on making that information available to proposers now, but we think that'll be a good resource for potential subscriber organizations. So I know there were questions earlier about interconnection, and for the larger projects and the mid-sized projects, as well as the small projects, we're always looking to improve the interconnection process. So the typical practice is that developers are responsible for all interconnection costs, whether or not the company or the developer builds the project. in phase 2 of CBRE, we've designed this so the company is agreeing to build all the interconnection facilities for interconnections on Maui and Hawaii Island that are interconnecting at the 12 kV level and below, and on Oahu for 25 kV interconnections and below. For the larger projects on Oahu, the developers would still have to do that, to build those interconnection facilities, and that, that's consistent with the practice in the stage 1 and stage 2 RFPs. In practice, we anticipate that the majority of these projects would be, of these smaller sizes. And then, kind of what's outlined here on the slide, the company is also, proposing a creative approach for interconnection for feedback. And you just want to note that this concept was not in the actual draft RFP, but it was in our filing on July 9th, described in Exhibit 1 in the narrative part of that filing. So this was something that, come up through discussions through the IGP process, and doing a lot of brainstorming about how interconnection can be improved. So what we're proposing, and we're offering up for feedback here, is something creative that we've looked to other places to see if we could get some ideas of how to do this. So what we're proposing is that the companies would take the responsibility of cost and completion of interconnection work for company-owned facilities. The benefits of that would be that it would remove the risk to developers and the uncertainty of what the cost of those company-owned interconnection facilities would be, depending on what an IRS or something may show, and it would remove the risk there then of a developer subscriber organization dropping out late in the process due to cost increases. This would also this process would avoid delays due to negotiation on the scope of the interconnection facilities, and then it would help the company also better control the design of these interconnection facilities, especially if we're looking at trying to manage multiple projects or projects, to take a broader view of what interconnection and what our system will look like. So to make this work, the companies would assume responsibility for these costs, and then separately seek recovery for those costs through some existing mechanisms or another approved means. Like I mentioned, we looked at something similar that's being utilized in New York, and we thought that this would be an opportunity to see if that would be beneficial here. So this is something, through the questions or through comments later on, this is something that we are looking for some feedback on. So moving on now to just a summary of changes to the evaluation process. Just wanted to note some highlights here. So between the order and the company's own assessment of how a CBRE RFP would be different from the RFPs that we've most recently done, some adjustments were made to the evaluation process for CBRE RFPs. So first, and maybe most important, is just the weighting of price factors and non-price criteria. So previously, through stage 1 and stage 2, we've utilized a 60% price, 40% non-price split in the initial evaluation, and that seems to work, and that would reflected the emphasis on getting pricing value for customers, but also making it important enough for non-price criteria to be considered. Here with CBRE, with other interests besides just price as a driver for successful projects, we thought it'd be appropriate to even out that price and non-price weighting of the evaluation. So recognizing so that the prices and value to all customers is most important, we're keeping that at 51% price and 49% non-price. But it's a recognition of the increased focus on non-price factors. So for the LMI RFPs, we did add 2 new non-price evaluation categories. I think these were alluded to in the order to capture CBRE specific items. So the first, and I'll go over them quickly here in a little bit more detail in a subsequent slide, but first is a CBRE program category, and that just allows us to evaluate different aspects of the program proposed by a subscriber organization. And obviously that was not applicable in the stage 1 and stage 2 RFPs. And then in terms of locational value, non-wires, and community resilience, that's something else that we added here to look at to see if there's value in projects in different particular locations. And for resilience in particular, for grid forming and black site, if those things are offered or useful. And so those are things that were not evaluated as a non-price criteria in stage 2 RFPs, where it was recognized that we needed those functionality. Those were just requirements in those RFPs. And then just to reflect the importance of these CBRE specific categories, those criteria will be double weighted along with community outreach and others that we've identified as being particularly important to highlight. I'll note that the non-LMI RFPs also have a commitment to residential participation category, and I'll discuss that in the next part of the presentation, the Molokai and Lanai part. But that category was excluded here because our assumption is just that the LMI customers by definition are also going to be residential customers. So that's our assumption. But if there are thoughts about that, again, that's something that we are looking for feedback on here. So just to go into detail, these 2 new criteria here. So this CBRE program, it just allows the company to evaluate several facets of the program that's being proposed. So what we require is just subscriber organization to submit a proposed plan for the program. And then, looking at previous experience with CBRE administration, looking at their experience with LMI residential customers, looking at what their plans for marketing and outreach are, and what their program offering it looks like. So those would be things that we would look at and evaluate based on our evaluation of the likelihood of success and what would provide the most benefits to the LMI customers, the subscribers in particular, and the residential customers in general. So examples would be just like financing options, upfront fees to the subscribers, pay-as-you-go model, public funding options, creative approaches, things that may offer higher expected customer savings or favorable payback periods, customer benefits. Really, really open to subscriber organizations being creative, and we want to not be prescriptive on what we're looking for here, but want to see what innovative things subscriber organizations come back with. Then to the second new criteria here, so the locational value criteria. So that looks at the non-wired alternatives and grid services and community resilience. And this is, these are all described in the draft RFP that was filed. So what the company has done and continues to do is identifying areas on our systems where siting of a CBRE project could support grid needs or future non-wire alternatives or community resilience. So non-wire alternatives have been identified for areas that do have grid needs. So for projects to support community resilience, storage, obviously, or storage with grid forming and black start capability would be needed in those areas that are identified with potential microgrids or critical customers or critical facilities to come back following a disruption in service. So there's a RFP appendix that will show areas identified that are more favorable, and proposals will be scored more favorably for locating in those areas. So again, this is a double-weighted category. And then to talk about evaluation and grid needs assessment, just on the back end of how we're going to do this, wanted to tie back to all the work that's being done in the IGP docket as well. And so, as indicated in the company's letter in May, to update the IGP schedule, the schedule of the work plan and, interdependencies with other dockets like CBRE. We're intending to demonstrate the grid needs assessment and the solution evaluation process developed through IGP, in particular through that solution evaluation and optimization working group, here in the CBRE RFPs. So, and that'll be done for the price evaluation and then through the detailed evaluation once a priority list of projects are selected. Then talking about contracts. So, there are, for the RFP project at least, there are two different forms of contracts that we've developed and provided, separate from the standard form contract for the tariff project. A mid-tier RDG PPA, a more streamlined version for these smaller projects. So from that 250 kW low end up to 2.5 megawatts on Maui and Hawaii Island, and up to 5 megawatts on Oahu. So, and this is in line with the commission order to not require further review for these mid-sized projects. So, part of the reason for creating this form contract would be, number one, to create a version that's appropriate for those size projects, and maybe not necessarily things that are much larger, but also to anticipate that this model, which is still being refined and worked on, is something that would be pre-approved by the commission, in line with the guidance that it would not be requiring further review after selection through an RFP. And we think that that's a good thing all around, because that expedited review process for those smaller projects, will give them better schedule certainty and, also help to meet, commission objectives and Act 100 objectives to, seek more diverse project size. So, I think it's really incentive to look at projects on the smaller end of the spectrum. So finally, just to go through the procurement timeline. So these are dates kind of just based on where we are today and dates that were in the order. So scheduled through September 8th is established by order. And so based on that, we're projecting issue date for the LMI RFPs, October 20th, and that's based on assumptions for 30-day commission review period, and then the following dates are based on assumptions for they all fall out from when that RFP is issued. So assuming that October 20 issue date leading up to issuance, then those following dates are listed in section 3.1, table 1 of the RFPs to go through the intermediate steps of when proposals will be due late in the year this year, when that initial evaluation and the priority list would be selected in March, and then selection of a award group towards the end of June 2021. And so once the RFPs are issued, once we do go through this initial process, those dates will be adjusted to match and be updated in the final RFPs when they're issued. But this timeline, it's consistent generally with the timeline we had for stage 1 and stage 2 RFPs. So that brings us to the end of the LMI RFP section of the presentation. So I think I'll throw it back to staff to moderate questions.
Great, thanks, Greg. And again, I'll remind everybody, if we don't have a chance to get all of your questions, we'll set up a way for you to email the commission. But I think for this round of questions, maybe we'll start off with commission staff or any commissioners that are on the line, and then we'll get to stakeholder questions. And feel free to either raise your hand or I guess just jump right in, because there are fewer of us.
Hey, Mike.
Yes.
Oh, this is Anand Samtani with the PUC. Sorry, I didn't get asked the question earlier to Mark Wong regarding the small projects. If you don't mind, I can ask that question. Go back a little bit. So for small projects and curtailment, Mark, assuming a small project is paired with energy storage, would it be dispatched to meet system needs in the same manner as mid-tier or large projects? I guess that question would go to Mark or anyone else at HECO.
This is Becca. I can take that. It would be dispatched. It would still be under the as available contract in the that was proposed that we filed. So it wouldn't move to a dispatchable model even with storage.
Okay. I guess my question is that how do companies anticipate the SOs will know how to optimally dispatch their facility in order to avoid uncompensated curtailment?
So under the as available, we're required to take the energy, except for certain conditions. One of them is excess energy on the grid. Others, system emergencies, or if the facility itself is, would cause harm to the grid or other customers. So we would be, so whenever they have energy available and it doesn't fall under one of those conditions where we can't take it under the as available contract, take the energy. But if, for example, we were curtailing the facility because of excess energy or another system issue, then that's when the developer will be able to charge their storage. And then if that storage was available at a later time, then we would take it under that same as available concept.
Okay. So I guess the SO, would they know like when to dispatch? I mean, would you guys communicate with them, or I'm just kind of curious how?
Yeah, they would receive a signal.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
if they're available and producing, we would take it, and then we would, they would receive a curtailment signal that would basically say we couldn't take it. And so then at that time we would, they would have to either shut down if they didn't have storage or available.
So when you said a signal, what kind of signal? Is that real time or 15 minutes ahead of curtailment?
I don't have the exact, I think it's it's real time. It is real time, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And Anand, this is Shelley. I'm not sure if this is relevant to your question, but I just want to make sure you're aware that they can still sign up for grid services and get compensated for that, and it would be dispatched based on the requirements and tariff for grid services or GSPA, whatever it ends up being.
Right, no, that's what I was wondering. They could probably use other grid services, right, too. Okay, thank you.
Other questions from commission staff or commissioners? Well, I'll ask one if nobody else is going to jump on that. It would be helpful if you could define a little bit more clearly the grid forming and black start needs that you've suggested here, and what these requirements are necessary.
So, Mike, is that are you referring to Molokai, Lanai?
Even just what we've seen with the LMI as well, but I think the question goes for both.
Yeah, so for the LMI RFP, I don't believe it's a mandatory requirement. It's up to the developer whether they want to propose those features. As part of, I think we do mention though that for the LMI, as part of meeting the community resilience objective, we would like those projects to be grid forming and black start capable. But again, it's not a requirement for any of those projects. Regarding Molokai, the requirement there, I believe we said black start and grid forming for greater than 1 megawatt. And that's in part, to recognize that we do want to be able to have the capability to run that grid without, like diesel generators online, for example. So having that capability there will help facilitate that. And that island currently, based on circumstances of other projects and such, does not have that capability on Molokai. And then for Lanai, it's a large plant, 17.5 megawatts. It's going to be the primary resource there for this. So for the same reasons, being able to hopefully facilitate running that grid without, diesel generators online, for example, it'd be prudent to require grid forming and black start capability.
And are those two terms sort of clearly defined in these documents? Will it be very evident to developers exactly what you're asking for?
Yeah, so we've defined it in the model PPA, the RDG PPA. I think we did incorporate perhaps some lessons learned on language based on our experience going through it with stage 2 currently. The challenge, just generally speaking, with that is, it's still a maturing technology in the industry, and there's no real standard way to define it yet. So we are, as in the stage 2 RFP, we are working sort of hand in hand with the developers and inverter manufacturers on what exactly that grid forming and black start should look like.
Okay. One more from me. This is on the grid needs assessment. So it would help for a little more explanation of how the grid needs work here is related to what's being done in IGP. And really the question is, can the CBRE work proceed independently from the timeframe in IGP, or is it tied to IGP timelines?
So we don't want to tie. We're not tying the CBRE work to. If you recall in our schedule update, we had kind of proposed to start, some of the substantial IGP work in December. So that's not tied to CBRE. But what we're trying to do here is, because some of the discussions and proposals we've made on how to perform grid needs assessment and solution evaluation in the solution evaluation working group are, they're new methods over what has been done in the past to facilitate sort of the intent and objectives of IGP. What we are proposing as part of the CBRE docket is to kind of start applying some of those new methodologies here, so we can get a better feel for how it would work in practice, and to the extent that there are improvements we can make before we start some of the larger procurements part of IGP. This CBRE proceeding gives us sort of that opportunity to look at how the new models and new methods can work.
Okay. Before I give other folks a chance to ask questions and give Commission and Commission staff a chance at their last shot here, if you've got your hand raised from the last time and haven't put it down yet, just please be aware of that, because we are going to go to you in the order the hands are raised. So if you don't need to have your hand raised, please put it down. But last set of Commission or staff questions before we move on to the stakeholders. Anyone else?
Hi, Mike. I just have a question for Greg. Maybe if we can go back one slide on the timeline here. I think it applies to the Molokai Lanai, or actually more the Lanai one coming up. Right, if we go to the last line, we're talking about basically a year from now before contract negotiations start. That's the proposal as it stands now.
Yeah, so just to clarify, this is scheduled for the 3 LMI exclusive RFPs. So I'll have a schedule for Molokai and Lanai in the next part of the presentation.
Okay, but if I remember, I think at least for Molokai, it's similar. I guess my question, more comment is, I think the ask is how we can all work together to move this along faster. Recognizing that includes the whole, really the stakeholder group here on the call, as well as others. But given the fact that in particular, we're trying to move these projects phase, but particularly for access for LMI customers, it just seems like at best, we're talking about a year from now before we even enter in negotiations, and then all the subsequent steps after that. So we're talking about multiple years out before we see kind of the tangible work. So I think I offer that we'll do what we can, but I think we've got to see how we move things faster. So thanks.
Thanks, Chair Griffin. I think the interest is always to move as quickly as we can. I think this schedule has played itself out now twice at least through 2 large RFPs, and so we're always looking at opportunities to beat the schedule, of course. But this is we've been able to meet this. It's been a challenge always, but we appreciate, and we're aligned with the interest in moving things along as quickly as we can.
Okay, understood. Thanks. And we understand that it takes the community here, so we'll work together and see how we can move things faster. That's all I have to say. Thanks, Mike. Let the others proceed.
Okay. So next, we're going to go back to what we were doing before with hands raised. So Nikki, if you could tell us who's got their hand up.
Yeah, so first up we have Will Geese, and then after that we have Miriam Bach.
Hi, thanks. This is Will. You guys can hear me?
Yes.
So my question is about HECO's RFI for land. And I guess this is another little bit of a compound question, but one is HECO's intent to run all of the land that it gets through this RFI through LVM maps to make sure, before they publish that list to developers, to make sure that they're good to be developed? And then are they going to constantly update that list relative to like hosting capacity and whatnot, and give it to developers who've already gotten it? And then is this list available to basically all developers that sign confidentiality agreements, or are there other requirements? And then how is HECO going to be using this list if they or its affiliates decide to build CBRE projects versus other developers?
Okay, that's a lot of parts. Let me start from the beginning here. So in terms of what sort of analysis is going to be done on the responses here, this is another one of those trade-offs that Mark talked about in the very beginning. In the interest of getting that list and those maps available to potential developers, subscriber organizations, we're not going to do hosting capacity or LVM kind of analysis on each of those parcels or locations. The interest is getting what's available and what landowners are willing to make available out. And as always with sites that are on the list or other sites identified by developers or subscriber organizations, we strongly encourage folks to ask about particular parcels, and we can answer questions better with more specifics. So I know we provide a little more information the first go around, but I think in the interest of having something that's a useful tool sooner, we're not going to do that level of analysis here. I think to the second part, I think about who it's available to, we're asking for NDAs to be signed, and that's I don't think there are any other restrictions on who can see that information. And in terms of affiliate or self-build developers, they're subject to the same rules, same restrictions. Affiliates in particular, just like in any other procurement, treated strictly as a third-party bidder. So those walls and those code of conduct things would be up and in place. But really leaning on the affiliate transaction requirements for affiliate proposals. And sorry, what was there another part of your question?
No, I think that's it for now. I think my one kind of, to use Isaac's term, like flag, is that I understand putting out like this RFI to find plots of land or potential sites. I guess I don't work at HECO, so I don't know how difficult it is to run these plots of land through like an LVM or hosting capacity, but I could see there, if I was a developer, looking at this list and saying, oh, here's a couple pieces of land that I might be able to develop this project on, and then coming back and saying, I've decided on this site, and then HECO says, oh, sorry, there's no hosting capacity on that site there, would make me a little bit irritated, I would imagine. And I wonder, I guess, if HECO was self-building, if they would be, you guys have all the information, so you would know what the best sites would be or not if you were going to build a CBRE. So that's kind of my one flag about that. But in general, I like the idea of having, as long as it's not restricted, a list of potential sites, because I know that, getting site acquisition has been difficult in the past, but those are just a couple flags. So thanks, Greg. I'll let other people ask questions.
Okay, right. And, we want questions to come in, with some specifics. The sites are just sites, and, we don't know particularly what a proposer would want to do on a particular site. So we can give a better answer with the more details in the question. So again, strongly encourage folks to ask.
Okay, and then now next up we have Miriam, and following her we have Gerald Sumida.
Hi, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, so I just had a question regarding the LMI project and the interconnection cost. So you guys mentioned in the filing that was released earlier this month that the interconnection cost will be assumed by the companies. So I was just wondering, how should the bidders of LMI projects assume interconnection costs in their bid price, and how will projects be evaluated based on their potential interconnection costs? So even though those aren't necessarily paying for the interconnection, will HECO, pick a project with a lower potential interconnection cost, or how do the bidders take that into account?
Hi, this is Becca Day of Matsushima from Hawaiian Electric. So, as currently drafted for the LMI RFP, doing our typical process where a developer is responsible for bidding all of the interconnection costs, and we have an exhibit to the RFP which has some high level cost information, but a developer is responsible for doing their own research and understanding what interconnection requirements might be, and developing their proposal and bidding those costs. And then a developer is and then that's part of the proposal lump sum payment that developer is bidding. And so that's just taken into account in the evaluation based on what the developer bids. However, what Greg described was an alternative approach that we proposed as part of Exhibit 1 based on feedback that we got from various parties in our IGP docket, looking for different ways that we could handle the interconnection process. So in that case, right now we're looking for feedback in the CBRE docket. Is that something that the commission, the consumer advocate, and all of the stakeholders that are involved think is an interesting concept and something that we should move forward with and try for the LMI proposals? And if we get that feedback that that's something that we should do, then we would switch, we would redraft that portion of the LMI RFP. And under that concept, we would ask developers not to bid any interconnection costs for company-owned interconnection facilities into the RFP. And we, the utility, would use kind of standard interconnection costs to proxy that in the evaluation. And we describe that in more detail in our Exhibit 1 filing of how that would work. And we'd have to lay it out in a little bit more detail in the RFP as well. But right now we're looking just to get some initial feedback on it. But we'd basically use a proxy cost in the evaluation if we went with the alternative method.
Okay, that answered my question. Thank you.
Yes, just to add to that, Miriam, we are trying to provide like standard single line interconnections in the RFP so that subscriber organizations can see what we would typically require, especially on the subscriber organization side of the demarcation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, up next we have Gerald Sumida, and after we have Kelly Friend.
Thanks, Greg. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you a little bit.
Good. I wonder if you could explain a little bit what you folks have in mind in terms of the Black Start capability for the LMI projects that you just described.
Yeah, Jerry, this is Mark. So for the Oahu, Maui, and Hawaii Island RFP, like we said, the Black Start is optional. I think the thought was that if someone did propose Black Start, they would get non-price evaluation, sort of scoring benefit, I guess, for providing that black start capability, with the intent being that there could possibly be a resilience tariff or resilience sort of program or procurement of some sort, and those projects would be ready to go because of their black start capability in the future. And then for Molokai and Lanai, it's sort of the same idea where, we, from just an island-wide perspective, we would want to have that sort of capability on those islands, should we have to start the grid from coming out from an island-wide outage. Sorry, Jerry, you're on mute if you were wanting to ask a follow-up.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you did not have a particular technology to provide that black start capability in mind, because, as you know, most of the black start capabilities, at least on mainland situations, are generators, either natural gas or diesel. So in an LMI context, I was just curious as to what you folks may have been thinking about when you were contemplating the possibility of having black start provided as part of the project.
Okay. Yeah, got it. Yeah, Darius, so for that, we do expect that, batteries with inverters can provide that capability. So it doesn't need to be a generator, synchronous generator, or anything like that.
Okay, but that would, if you're talking about batteries, then that would be a limited time function for the batteries, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that's correct. I guess maybe part of the question there, or the thing that we're thinking through is, you could use the battery to at least restart the grid. And then once you have the grid energized, there could be other resources on the grid to help, at least in the context of Molokai and Lanai. I guess, it's a little bit different if you're talking about a specific cluster or location on Oahu and Maui and Hawaii Island.
Okay, thanks very much.
Yeah.
Okay, next we have Kelly, and then after that we have Chuck Watkins.
Thank you so much. My question has to do with the rules around the low-income subscriber verification and compliance. Specifically the residency requirement that that the potential subscriber has to live in their home for 6 months prior to subscribing. I just want to flag that, in terms of the practical implications of that, that's likely going to lead to fewer low-income folks being able to participate. So I was hoping I could hear kind of what the rationale behind that requirement was. And I was also hoping to hear the same for the verification requirements. We need to make sure that the folks who are low income and participating in the program are in fact low income. A lot of other markets that have tried either tax documents or pay stubs find that those kinds of invasive verification mechanisms lead to distrust and participation, because we're basically asking people to turn over sensitive personal information to companies that are marketing to them. And so I just want to suggest that as much as we can make participation and verification a more passive experience using other types of information as a proxy for lower moderate income qualification, I would suggest that. So looking at other programs in Hawaii that may have similar income limits, and using eligibility for those programs as eligibility for the for this program, and then looking at potentially census data, or census tracked data, which is often used in other programs as a proxy. It's just in trying to help low moderate income folks save money on energy can sometimes lead to an adverse impact on them if we're asking them to produce these documents that contain really important information that they may not be able to produce. And if that's the only way that they can participate, we may find that there's a lower participation rate. Thanks.
Thanks. That's a good point to make. And I think we're still looking at different methods and modes for verification. So appreciate the feedback on that.
I'll just add on the verification. This is Shelley, and others can jump in. But I think that method was born out of utilizing the HUD requirements for low to moderate income, and some of these other programs didn't use those same benchmarks. So we actually like the idea of depending on others who've already done the verification. So we'll take a look at that and see if there can be a waiver on the HUD requirements if they've qualified through other programs and there was some sort of information.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, I think that's exactly what the ideal outcome is, that where folks are qualifying with other state agencies potentially for certain programs, there's an inherent trust in terms of sharing that sensitive information. And for the subscriber organizations who don't want to be custodians of that sensitive information or have to ask for it at all, being able to point someone to say, hey, you can get qualified if you qualify for another program and can show us an eligibility letter for X program, I think that's ideal, really. And that really won't solve all of it, because there are some people who won't qualify for one but could qualify for others. But the more we can kind of try to capture the population of folks who are eligible for other programs and already either enrolled or already qualified in terms of producing documents, I think that's a good outcome. Thanks.
Yeah, no, we like that as well. In fact, we were trying to figure out if there's a central kind of state government entity that could qualify folks, because I think we won't be the only ones providing programs to low to moderate income, and residents can just go to one place to get qualified and then apply for many different programs. But I think that's a longer term solution.
Oh, and let's see, Kelly, I think there was the other question about the 6-month requirement. And so I think one of the key requirements under the CBRE is that you can only subscribe to an amount that is indicative of your historical usage of electricity. And so I think the requirement was 12 months of historical usage, but I think the 6-month we'll be using only 6 months, I think, for LMI. So we've lessened it, I think, but the idea is that we need to have some kind of historical usage for the customer in order to right size their subscription.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think we could, I'm certainly happy to provide feedback in terms of other ways that you could kind of get at that information. I think in other markets, you can probably find averages for folks who qualify for energy assistance or who are otherwise on some sort of discounted rate, if that is another proxy. So I think there are probably some other creative ways we could get that, because I think most subscriber organizations' experience would be that there at least is probably some correlation between moving and folks would be eligible for these programs. And so we would just want to be sensitive to, I think generally, all of these rules just need to be thought through the lens of what the need of the low income and moderate income population is in any market where we're trying to serve them. And so I think that's really what we're getting at.
Right, we understand, and in that same vein too, as well. I think we wouldn't want an LMI customer to oversize subscription, have to pay more than what they, what their usage is, and so I think that's also a consideration we have to keep in mind as well. But we do like the ideas, and we are, as we said at the top of the presentation, that we are open to all feedback and different creative ideas that we can utilize to get to the overall purpose of what we're trying to get here, and that is to open up this program to as many LMI customers as possible for a segment of the population that has been underserved. Thank you.
Okay, up next, and our final question comes from Chuck Watkins.
Thank you. Chuck Watkins with ICAS. I wanted to quickly thank Kelly for that comment on verification. I think that's really key for lowering costs for acquisition of low-income clients. I also wanted to make a quick comment on earlier when it was talked about in the low to moderate income world, what other types of housing is not residential, although the residents pay tariffs, residential tariffs, but it's master metered multifamily properties. If you have a lot of those on the islands, then or any, they will be left out of this program. So that should be taken into consideration, how to qualify those types of properties. And then I had a quick question. Can you just elaborate a little bit on the RDG PPA model, maybe just describing how it's different than the small program bill credit?
Sure, I can. This is Becca Day of Matsushima from Hawaiian Electric. So our RDG PPA is a dispatchable PPA. So traditionally, wind or solar, other variable resources, throughout, I think, the United States have been contracted for, including here in Hawaii, under as available. So as I was discussing earlier in the presentation, if it's available, we take the energy. Under the RDG contract, the developer is compensated through a lump sum payment, and in return, we get the ability to dispatch that facility to best meet the needs of the grid. So we can choose to take the energy or not take the energy, as best suits the grid at any given time. And if it's paired with storage, then it's even more flexible and allows us to load shift that energy to the evening hours. So it's really that concept of that dispatchability and having more control from the utility side over how the energy is used.
Got it. Thank you very much.
Okay, I know we've got a bunch more hands raised. And again, there'll be an opportunity to ask those questions via email. I'll post the link at the end, but it's puc.comments@hawaii.gov. We want to make sure everybody has a chance to get those questions answered. But for now, I think to keep things roughly on schedule, we're going to move to a break. So I have about 11:37 is the time. I think we can reconvene at 11:50. So we will do that now, and then when we come back, we'll get to our final presentation from Hawaiian Electric. Okay, folks, I've got 11:50, so I think we should get started with the third and final presentation, which will be on the Molokai and Lanai RFPs. So I'm going to turn it again back over to the folks at Hawaiian Electric.
Okay, can everybody see slides again?
Looks good.
Okay. Great. Okay. Thanks, everyone. It's a long morning, but morning again. I'm Greg Shimokawa, I'm the Manager of Energy Procurement at Hawaiian Electric. So for this part of the presentation, I'll be going over some of the details for the RFPs for Lanai and Molokai. So keeping kind of with the same format to the LMI presentation, I'll move quickly through the portions that are kind of the same between these RFPs and the LMI RFPs. Talk specifically about some of the direction given by the Commission through the order, for Lanai and Molokai, and then some details about the RFPs and the contracts, and then finally again the timeline here. So I'm just going back to some of the guidance from the Commission's order. These RFPs for Molokai and Lanai are modeled off of what was done in Stage 1 and Stage 2. Each of these RFPs are unique in slightly different ways, but similar in that we're still using the REGPPA model. We're appropriate using to encourage evaluation criteria to promote good services, location of benefits, reliability and resilience benefits. A little bit different on Lanai, where we have a site selected already, so those location of value things are not applicable there. And then, like I mentioned in the LMI presentation here, where it's not 100% LMI customers that we're seeking, we are looking at the additional criteria to look at residential and LMI participation. So for both of these RFPs, per order, the entire capacity amount is out here in tranche 1 of phase 2 of CBRE, and including capacity transferred over from phase 1. So just to note that that's how we are proceeding here. Then just to get into details of the RFP, so to discuss Lanai first. The idea here and what we proposed in our filing was to hybridize what was already out existing for the Lanai variable renewable dispatchable RFP that's been started and stopped for various reasons over the course of the last year or so, and merge that here with the requirements for a CBRE RFP. We think just having one project reduces concurrent procurements for the Lanai community. We think that this is a innovative approach to sort of get the best value for what we're seeking. So, and then noting that phase 1 of CBRE, did not result in any projects on Lanai. So we thought that this would be an opportunity to really facilitate and increase the chances of success. So we think this reduces costs in general for the project. We can leverage economies of scale and coordinate, great interconnection at a optimal selected position. We're able to move quicker, based on previous land use and environmental studies that have been done already on the site that's been offered by Pulama Lanai, that's the landowner for most of the island. So updating the assumption, so some adjustments from 2019 when the variable renewable dispatchable RFP first went out. So updating the scope, we are now assuming that the Lanai Sustainability Research Facility and the Manila Bay Stage 3 facilities are no longer available. Looking to solve for a scenario where the system is to run with no must-run fossil fuel units on many days of the year. Looking to cover increased load with both resorts on the island remaining connected to the system, and just looking at more updated load and fuel forecasts. And this, in the end, it really accelerates the movement, the progress towards 100% RPS. So this is something that we did detail in Exhibit 1, and we're going to talk more about in the question period. So looking at the different requirements for Molokai and Lanai RFPs, consistent with the order, there'll be one RFP each for each island. There is no separate LMI RFP here, so any LMI participation would have to be through the project or project on Lanai or project or multiple projects on Molokai. So here on Molokai, that entire 2.75 megawatts for phase 2 will be reserved for CBRE, which is different from Lanai, where the total size of the project that we're seeking is 17.5 megawatts. In terms of energy target, that's 35.8 gigawatt hours per year. To put it in terms consistent with our stage 1 and stage 2 RFPs. But out of that 17.5 megawatts, 3 megawatts, what's identified in the order, will be reserved for CBRE. In terms of project technology, similar to what was discussed in LMI and even more so for the small project earlier, the companies believe that at the scale of the projects being sought here, PV paired projects have the greatest ability to reach commercial operations as soon as possible. So, so by limiting technologies to these resources, we're hoping to attract a wide range of proposals that will meet, the shared objectives to speed market development and, to get customer access to the benefits of CBRE as quickly as possible. And then in terms of storage is going to be required just for the smaller islands to make it work on those systems. So 4 hours of continuous storage for Molokai, and and the same for Lanai. So 4 hours at the full size, full capacity of the facility. So one thing I did want to raise here is that on Molokai, where we're open to different projects and not predetermining a site and the requirements. We're seeking feedback from the Molokai community about what the interest in would be for reservation of capacity for small tariff projects under 250 kilowatts. The way the RFP is set up now, it's the minimum size is at 250 kilowatt size. And that's sort of that's to balance sort of the desire for more availability on more circuits for other distributed energy kinds of projects. I think that was a comment that was raised earlier about the difficulties interconnecting on Molokai. But that's a question that we did ask earlier this month when we went out to Molokai virtually for a community meeting to sort of go back to them. And there's been consistent dialogue with both the Molokai and the Lanai communities about what types of projects, what types of locations, what types of technologies are of interest to those communities. And this is a question we haven't received too much feedback on this particular question from the Molokai community about desire for carve out for small projects. We haven't gotten too much response yet, but that's something that we are looking for feedback on. but the way that the RFP is drafted now, the way that the program is set up now is that any CBRE project on Molokai would have to be 250 kW or larger. Moving on to more RFP requirements on Lanai, I think consistent with trying to get this solution in sooner and the merging of the previously issued RFP, and also recognizing the ability to move a little bit quicker with a predetermined site and some of those requirements already set. That guaranteed commercial operations date is December 31st, 2024. On Molokai, we're looking again at a December 31st, 2025 date, similar to the LMI RFPs in the rush before the filing. That date was inadvertently omitted from the draft RFP. In terms of locations for the project, so Lanai, there is that Ulama Lanai owned site that's been identified, and details of that are in the draft RFP included with the filing. On Molokai, sites would be at the developer's option, and again, the land RFI responses could be a tool to help with site selection. In terms of interconnection, the same policy that we proposed for the LMI RFPs, is holds true here for Molokai as well. So interconnection at 12 kV and below only, and size limitations for those projects would be 3 megawatts or lower, which the total capacity being sought is only 2.75, so that shouldn't be an issue there. On the night, again, with that pre-selected site, interconnection is set to go right into the adjacent Mickey Basin switchyard. Then in terms of resilience and grid services, on Molokai, grid forming and black start will be required for projects larger than 1 megawatt. And then on the night, since we're setting those requirements, more specifically for that project, we are requiring grid forming and black start, and that's just to reflect, what we're intending to use that project for on the island. So then in terms of project variations, like I talked about with the LMI RFPs, to expedite sort of review on the company side to move through those quicker, we're proposing to reduce the number of variations allowed under a single proposal fee from 4 to 2. And then consistent with what we went out with in the original Lanai RFP, only a single proposal is permitted. In terms of proposal fees, recognizing, again, our interest, mutual interest in having successful projects, proposing $2,000 for the fee for all Molokai projects. And that's consistent, recall with our decision to make the LMI exclusive RFP proposal fee to be half of what it would normally be. And then for the larger project, $5,000 is what we asked for originally with that original RFP, and the project now is larger than it was from what we proposed back in November of last year. In terms of community outreach, that's it's important everywhere, but we've taken a particular note for these small island communities, and so we did have virtual community meetings earlier this month, one each on Molokai and on Lanai, not just for CBRE, but for updates in general. So having an idea of what those communities are interested in or what their concerns are is very important to us. And then, there will be ongoing community outreach requirements for any selected developer subscriber organization through the RFP and through the PPA. So I think we've discussed that a little bit earlier in the presentation. And then, in terms of self-billed or affiliate participation in these RFPs, and to draw a distinction between how we're interpreting the guidance for the LMI RFP, consistent with the guidance in the order, the companies do intend to allow for both self-billed and affiliate bids into these two Lanai and Molokai RFPs. And then similarly for the non-LMI exclusive Oahu, Hawaii, and Maui RFPs that'll be filed later on this year. And for those, that the same rules would apply like we've had in stage 2 for the RFP with conduct walls for self-build projects, for treating affiliate bids, truly as third-party bids and completely separate from any company process. But just wanted to be clear about how, what we drafted and what we've submitted as our proposed RFPs. So here, this is a similar slide, talking about proposed changes to the evaluation process here. And like we talked about in the LMI RFPs, we're proposing to adjust that price versus non-price weighting for the initial evaluation to 51% price and 49% non-price. Same 2 new categories that we talked about in the LMI RFP, the CBRE program and locational value community resilience. And then as I started to note in earlier, we did add another here to talk about residential participation. As Mark talked about, very early this morning in the presentation, we do have that 40% residential minimum requirement. But here we would give preference in the evaluation to subscriber organizations that would commit to a larger than 40% residential percentage, and also to subscriber organizations that would commit to LMI customers, being that there's no other avenue here for LMI exclusive capacity. So the greater the amount of LMI or residential participants that a subscriber organization would commit to, the higher the score in this evaluation category would be. So just to kind of dive a little bit deeper into this new residential participation non-price criteria, proposals will be evaluated on the planned commitments of the subscriber organization to encourage that participation. And this would be a double-weighted criteria, just like the other new CBRE specific criteria. For the Lanai, the 40% of that 3 megawatts must be reserved. And this ties in, to the verification and the penalty parts for LMI participation, discussed in the LMI presentation. Just to avoid gaming of this evaluation criteria, there need to be some checks on the back end to make sure that subscriber organizations follow through with what they've committed to and what we've, as evaluated, reward them for the RFP. So again, this is the CBRE program criteria here. So, looking at, similar to the LMI RFP one, this is looking at the different facets of the program that's proposed. So, CBRE administration, marketing and outreach, this would give the company, the evaluators, the ability to give preference to program offerings, again, that are most likely to succeed and that demonstrate the most benefits, the greatest benefits to residential customers or to LMI customers as applicable. So same things that we'd be looking for here. So, financing options or other innovative approaches, higher expected customer savings, things like that. So that would be kind of a more holistic look at what kind of program and what kind of detail, what kind of experience a subscriber organization comes in with. So this locational value criteria, like I mentioned, on the night where we're setting the location, there's not a need for this evaluation criteria. But on Molokai, where there are different, we're opening it up to developer proposed locations. It'll be similar to what we discussed earlier with the LMI RFPs, where the proposals will be looked at depending on where they are. For Molokai in particular, though, I just want to note that we have not identified any NWA opportunities. So the NWA portion of this criteria is not applicable to this RFP. So wanted to note that. And then also that requirement for grid forming and black start would be for projects 1 megawatt and larger. And that would just be a requirement. And we talked about the grid needs and solution evaluation methodology that we've been working through and through the IGP process. So very similar to the LMI RFPs for Molokai. On the NAI, similar to consistent with what we talked about with the originally filed RFP, we think we can do evaluation of projects, similar projects on the same site, of the same size and scope, without doing the detailed evaluation step. So that'll allow us to get to an award considerably quicker than otherwise we would have. So that hasn't changed from what was originally filed for Lanai. Then moving on to contracts here. On Molokai, they're going to be the same contract form used for the other islands. For Molokai, there will be both that mid-tier REG PPA and the one that we are proposing will be pre-approved, and then also the large RDG PPA for greater than 2.5 megawatt size projects. And then the difference for the order is the mid-tier one would not need subsequent commission approval, whereas a large negotiable PPA would require that PUC approval to move forward. And I guess the main difference here would be that some of the specific terms around the LMI requirements that are in the 100% LMI contracts wouldn't be included here. Then for Lanai, it's a little bit of a different contract form, just because there's a combination of CBRE and non-CBRE elements together into a single facility. So the draft of that wasn't quite ready to file on July 9th with the rest of the filings, but did want to note that draft is available on the company's website now for review and comment. So on the hawaiianelectric.com/competitive bidding website, or on the Lanai RFP website in particular, both places where that contract draft is available for review and comment. So basically that's the RDG PPA with CBRE elements added for the CBRE portion, but the idea that it is, as described in the RFP, it's a single facility, just with 2 portions. Okay, keep moving relatively quickly through this. So this is the schedule slide here for Molokai and Lanai. So again, all the dates align up to the point where proposals are due. Actually, sorry, take a step back. So just like with the LMI RFP, scheduled through September 8th, when the final RFP would be filed. That's established by order. But then subsequent to that, all the dates up to the point where proposals are due, in December, December of this year, Molokai and Lanai align. And then, like I discussed earlier with Lanai, with that more defined scope and location, single location and interconnection design, we'd be able to select that final award group in March instead of in late June. So that would move a few months faster than it would, for Molokai as well as for the LMI RFPs. So again, our interest is always, aligned with the commission and the stakeholders, customers, is to move these along as quickly as we're able. But this schedule and the iterations and this cadence has been, done now both through stage 1 and stage 2, and it's something that's been reasonable to work through. But we do recognize the interest in getting benefits to customers as quickly as we're able. So with that takes me to the end of the Molokai and Lanai RFP portion of the presentation. Hopefully that'll leave a little bit more time for questions. So thank you everyone again for your time for all 3 of these presentations, and for your engagement and your feedback. So, we're really interested to hear that.
Great, thank you, Greg. And just as a housekeeping note, although I think the agenda said we would be going till 12:30, I think we can try and stay on at least until 1 o'clock to field extra questions. So we'll go again, just like we have been doing. Please raise your hand in the participant section, and Nikki will call on you in order. I'm also going to paste the link to ask questions if you don't get a chance to ask them right now. So Nikki, whenever you're ready.
Great. So far, no hands. Oh, we have Miriam.
Hi, yeah, I just have a couple of follow-up questions, and it looks like this might be the last to do in-person question and answer. I just want to confirm one thing, well, a couple of things actually. Are projects selected based on the largest reduction of costs to ratepayers?
Hi, this is Becca. No, that's not how it works. So as Greg noted, there's a 49-51% non-price price split for the initial evaluation. So we're looking at both price and non-price factors, and how a project scores on each of those sides will determine if it moves along further in the evaluation. So we're not looking just at price, and then in the detailed evaluation we're looking at a cost benefit analysis. So there's more emphasis on the benefits to the customer in that latter half, but the non-price factors do play an important role in the evaluation in which project gets selected.
Yes, so I guess maybe to clarify my question, I was specifically asking for the price component. If it was selected based on which project reduced the cost to ratepayers the most, or would it be based on which project had the lowest bid? Those could be 2 very different things.
Yeah, it's based on the reduction in cost, so the cost benefit analysis to the customer, not necessarily the price.
Okay, thank you.
Nikki, do we have other folks in the queue? Or have people put their hands down?
Yeah, we have Isaac, and that's it for now.
Hi, I'm happy to volunteer. Actually, I wanted to follow up on the creative proposal in the last round regarding interconnection costs, if I may. And I don't want to lose the opportunity to follow up on that because the companies were specifically asking for feedback on that. So yeah, I'd like to offer feedback that I thought it was a very creative and thoughtful proposal. And we should definitely continue to discuss it and seriously pursue it. I think it addresses head on this issue that a lot of the questions have been hovering around, which is this little go fish or game about trying to pick a site and then getting hit by interconnection costs. And I understand a project on Molokai on phase 1 basically died because of that kind of situation. And so the more we can get proactive in terms of trying to control those costs or that risk, I think it only helps. And this concept of the utility kind of proxying it out and then being ultimately responsible for the final bill makes a lot of sense in terms of giving the utility skin in the game for those types of costs and not just offloading it to developers and ultimately the ratepayers, I suppose. And then again, sort of limiting the risk for the developers in this sort of dart throwing game of trying to find a suitable location without getting surprised by or ambushed by the interconnection costs. I would just note that I think we should consider this approach not just for LMI projects, but maybe for CBRE projects in general, given the real need to jumpstart this market segment. And again, like the huge uncertainty that is being expressed, I think, in some of these questions about how do we find out, where's the available opportunities, and it's a little bit of a catch-22 too, because you have to provide site control, and and make the investment to do that, and yet you find out after that, whether what the costs are going to be for interconnection. Anything we can do to be more proactive in that I think is only helpful. And I appreciate the eco companies coming up with this particular proposal to try to move that agenda forward.
Thanks, Isaac. We appreciate the feedback. We did consider expanding it beyond the LMI RFPs, but because it's our first time doing this and we aren't quite sure exactly how it's going to work, it'll likely require additional recent filings on the utility side for cost recovery and moving ahead and approval of those interconnection facilities. We thought it was best to limit it as a pilot to just the LMI RFPs, which will be a limited number of projects versus CBRE, which could be a huge unknown number of projects at this point, given the size of the program. So our initial thought was to use this as a pilot, especially for LMI, where we're trying to encourage participation and keep costs low there. And then if that works, to expand it out further in the future to other procurements.
I mean, I can imagine that we're going to get feedback from the consumer advocate about cost control and things like that. It shouldn't be a blank check, but I think sort of the utility being responsible for those types of costs whatever. I think there's an inherent incentive there, or should be anyway, to keep those costs in check rather than the moral hazard of just like putting them someplace else or shifting the responsibility. But I think that's part of the discussion of how you make this thing work in terms of how do we make sure we have the most sort of efficient process. I think time too, like turning around sort of the decision on what upgrades are actually needed, and not like delaying it while the developer is sitting there with their project ready to go. I think that's an important consideration too. But all of that I think is worthy to further pursue for sure. Positive feedback basically.
Okay, we have one other question from Michelle Daigle.
Hey, this is Michelle Daigle from the Consumer Advocate. I have a question about what types of safeguards the companies have considered to protect subscribers if a subscriber organization cannot meet its commitments and is subjected to liquidated damages.
Well, this is Kevin Oda from Hawaii Electric. So I think how we've structured it initially is that the price reductions and the reductions in the payments are going to initially be applied against the payments that the subscriber organization would be entitled to for unsubscribed energy, or what we've called unsubscribed RDG for the RDG projects. But so to the extent that there's projects that are not fully subscribed, which we anticipate that will be the case, there's a certain amount of payment that will go to the subscriber organization, and to the extent that there are adjustments to price and payment based on the performance of the facility, we would make those adjustments against the subscriber organization's payment. So it would insulate the subscribers from paying that every single month, or reducing their bill credit, in other words.
In addition to what Kevin said, also for, I think, the mid-tier and large projects, developers are required to provide security. And so even if there was no unsubscribed portion of the facility, the damages would come from that security until it was depleted before going on to seek liquidated damages from subscriber bill credit.
Right. Thanks, Becca.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else have any questions?
I'll jump in with one, Nikki. So this is going back to the interconnection, the reduction in time for studying from 150 to 90 days. I'm interested to know how the companies were able to achieve that reduction. Is it additional staffing? Is it changing the review somehow? What did they do to make that happen? What do they anticipate doing?
Hi, Mike. It's Mark. So for the 150 to 90-day proposal, that's for the small projects, so less than 250 kW. And so the way we're trying to achieve that is, I think what we've been, as we've sort of gotten more experience with some of these smaller type of projects through SIA or other programs, CGS, CSS. We've kind of become more proficient with the modeling, and we think that kind of setting the standard interconnection requirements through the standard single line drawings that we're providing as part of the tariff will help to sort of streamline that process. So, I mean, essentially it's, trying to do more of the modeling and analysis in-house, as well as, standard interconnection requirements. So all of those things put together. And, it's just also making sure that, this is a priority to be able to get this program up and running. I think more importantly, just sort of prioritizing resources to be able to do this work.
Great. And is the 90 days, is that sort of a floor, or do you think it could be done even faster in some cases?
Yeah, we're hopeful that in some cases we can go even faster. But I would say, we didn't want to overcommit ourselves there. So I would say, based on what we're thinking we're going to see in terms of small projects and those proposals, that would sort of be the ceiling. And then, we, as part of that interconnection process, since we really tried to think hard about how we can streamline this, we did say earlier in the first presentation that, for the circuit, for projects on circuits above hosting capacity, we're going to try to evaluate everything and come up with any necessary mitigations without requiring an IRS for those circuits or for those projects on circuits that have available hosting capacity.
Thanks, Mark. Are there any last chance to do questions live? Now's your chance. I know we've had a few that have. Go ahead. Yeah, please go ahead.
This is Anand Samtani, PUC. I'm just kind of wondering, what is your outreach plan to inform potential SOs, developers for small and large projects? Considering that the increase in program capacity would likely expand your previous outreach efforts, from phase one, which included like publications, newspapers, directly contacting developers. Just kind of curious about that.
Great. I can start with that, and others can join in on that. I think we're just trying to kind of be an all of the above sort of approach. So in addition to what we did in phase one of CBRE, now that they're larger projects, we're going to leverage the contacts and the distribution that our group has with doing those RFPs, stage one and stage two applications. Otherwise, other than that, working with our independent observer, definitely. I think, the interest is to get this out as broadly as we can.
And would this be like an ongoing effort too? I mean, I know with phase one, it was like more of a big initial push and it kind of stopped, and then I'm just kind of curious how is it more ongoing in terms of your efforts for outreaching to potential developers?
Yeah, this is Mark Wong. I can comment on that. We do anticipate this will be an ongoing effort, not just a one-time thing. As Greg mentioned, we have quite a lengthy list of developers that were interested in the stage 1 and 2 RFPs. We were able to leverage that earlier in April when we had the online demo for the CBRE portal, and I think we got a lot of good feedback and engagement on that, and we're trying to continue that engagement. But we're also working on an overall plan to expand our outreach using publications, as mentioned, outreach to the mainland, but also here on island, because we want to find subscriber organizations locally too, and try to build I guess the number of local projects and so there is a plan that we're working on for that type of outreach. Including nonprofits and other organizations.
So it's definitely an expansion of that formal list from phase one, right?
Definitely, yes.
Okay.
We think to reach the capacity to fill that,
right.
It'll have to be a pretty large effort to find this many interested parties.
We also welcome input from the stakeholders on this call. If they have channels that they think would be helpful, we welcome that input.
Thanks, Shelley.
Thank you. I have another question if Mike doesn't mind, unless somebody else has a question. Okay. So earlier was mentioned about the online portal a few times. Can you just give us a kind of a brief status update on terms of like current functions and capabilities and potential additional functions moving forward?
Yeah, as mentioned in an earlier presentation, the portal went live late Friday, this past Friday. We haven't publicized it yet because we didn't want to do that and have subscribers go in without any projects loaded in yet, because at this time there is no phase one projects that are online. The functionality was built around the phase one framework, and the portal meets all of those requirements. And as mentioned earlier in the presentation, it also has the ability to handle the pay-as-you-go and pay-upfront models, as well as doing transfers, even the partial transfers that we had talked about earlier, and doing all the eligibility checks. And then on the back end, it does have the capability to do the bill crediting and management of subscribers. We are looking at an additional phase to implement any of the new phase two requirements that may come as a result of this decision and order, but that's still in the planning stages, of course.
Yeah, so we did a demonstration, a couple demonstrations for those that were interested. I think now that phase two is up and running, I'm guessing there may be more interest and we can actually do another demo on it. There's functionality for subscribers as they're enrolling. There's functionality for SOs and for the utility to administer the program, and it helps us streamline across those three parties and minimize the handoffs.
Okay, thank you.
And just to go back to the outreach for one more second, is there an outreach plan already in the materials filed? Or I don't know if I saw that in there.
As far as Hawaiian Electric's outreach, we did not file that in this recent filing.
Okay.
Okay, I'd like to open up the questions to anyone that called in on the phone line.
Sure, everybody's in. It sounds like there may not have been any questions on the phone. If there were any questions on the phone, I guess maybe the best thing to do is submit them via email, but it sounded like there were just a lot of open mics and some static. So with that said, I'll give one more last call for any questions from staff, the consumer advocate, or any stakeholders before we wrap up.
Oh, I have a few hands.
Oh, good.
There's, I think, Renee Komita, and then next there's Michelle Daigle.
Hi, this is Reen. I wanted to follow up on Anand's question about the portal. So I just wanted to confirm, because I think at the last demonstration, there wasn't the ability to filter by type of payment plan or to compare projects. And I guess I wanted to understand if that's still the case, or potentially something that might be. I know you said that there is still ongoing work with the portal.
Irene, I don't know if we have the right subject matter experts on the phone to answer that. I do recall that. I know we added the functionality for pay-as-you-go. As far as the comparison, we'll have to follow up.
Okay. Thank you. And sorry if I could just ask one more. So I know that our office submitted comments in the DER docket about potentially looking at a PV host type model for CBRE. And I guess I wanted to get feedback from Hawaiian Electric as well as any other stakeholders about whether that model, whether you felt that model is consistent with the current framework, or there's anything that kind of precludes folks from utilizing a similar type of model. And just kind of, I know everyone is not involved in that docket, but it's essentially a model where to address or where the utility or developer could reach out to a landlord to rent roof space and then enter into some sort of, or have a program where the tenants would benefit from bill credits. And I just kind of wanted to get some reaction to that. Thank you.
So, Reen, I'll take a stab at that. So at any time, any SO could reach out to someone who has a rooftop, right, and pay them sort of lease payments to utilize their roof to build a solar project or a CBRE project, any kind of project, actually. Maybe your question is more as to whether the utility will be ready to provide the bill credits for a more centralized program. And to that question, I don't know. We don't have a specific timeline on when that could happen.
Okay, although I guess notionally, if an SO kind of came to you with that sort of structure, could that currently be accommodated? Whether it's through the portal or something else?
I think you have to be more specific on what you're asking us to do if they come to us with that. Are you asking us to provide a bill credit to the customer, the subscribers, provide a payment for unsubscribed energy to the SO, and then on top of that, provide a credit to the tenant, to the host?
Well, I'm thinking if it's something that that a developer is coming in with, that they would probably be providing the rental fee to the tenant, and that there would be some subscriber agreement which would describe bill credits and payments from the tenants. And at least at a very broad brush, that kind of struck me as something that could be accommodated within the current program. But I don't know if I'm kind of missing some big issues or complications.
Just to make sure I understand, I think you're basically just saying, can a subscriber organization work with a landlord of a building to put their PV facility on that roof, and then only offer the tenants in that building to be subscribers, just limiting the subscribers to that particular building? Is that basically what?
It could be those tenants. It could be others as well.
Yes, I don't know if others from Hawaiian Electric will disagree, but I don't think there's anything that currently would prohibit that. As Shelley noted, any rooftop space can be used, and subscriptions can be offered to anyone as long as they meet the requirements of the program.
Okay. No, thank you.
Yeah, Reen, this is Kevin Oda. I'm not, I guess in just thinking about this, just off the top of, you're talking about a program that's within CBRE, and so maybe the only limitation would be the types of program limitations we have already proposed in the tariff, the 4 subscriber requirement and the residential customer requirements and things like that.
Okay, no, thank you.
Okay, next up we have Michelle Daigle.
Hi, I had a quick question on the reporting requirements. I noticed that there's some changes between Rule 26 and Rule 29 in which the subscriber organizations don't have to report new subscriptions until no later than the last day of the calendar month, and that appears to be effectively pushing back when subscribers will see any kind of benefits to their bill by 3 billing cycles instead of 2. And I'm wondering what led to these changes in the notification requirements. What was considered?
This is Kevin Oda. I'm not sure we have everybody here, but to answer this question, but I think what your question is twofold. I think one is having to do with notification of changes to the subscriber base, and us expanding that to the last day of the month. I think that's more of a portal expansion, I think, that we're able to accommodate. The 3 billing cycle potential for bill credits, I think you're referring to what we see or what we've put into the RDG PPAs. And Greg, correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I think because of the way the lump sum payment is done, and then the reporting on that, in how that occurs. Oh wait, this shouldn't apply to that. Yeah, I'm okay. On the second one, I'm not sure. We're gonna have to get back to you. With respect to your question, what are you looking at where you're talking about the 3 billing cycle?
So I noticed this. It was on sheet number 2919I. So, and it's section C4 where you have that change. And I noticed that on the red line. So should be fairly quick to find on the red line. But I'm just wondering why that delay has occurred, and if there's any way we could speed up the effects or the bill credits that consumers could see, subscribers could see on their bills, particularly in light of what's going on with the state with the pandemic and economic recovery.
Okay, I'm not sure if we have the right person on the line that can answer that question, but we'll take it back and look at that. I'm not exactly sure what the genesis of that was, so we can follow up on that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sorry. Hey, this is Mark Wong. We were going to mention it. Well, I think I did mention it verbally in the first presentation, but we did make a change to when the subscriber notifications have to be entered in by the subscriber organization in the portal. And in phase 1, it was 5 days prior to the production month, but we moved it in phase 2 to the last day of the production month to give the subscriber organization more time to get it in so that the bill credits would get on earlier, so that we'd be able to capture those subscribers as late as for the end of the month, before then they would receive the bill credits in the month following. So we did try to move that up a little bit, but as Kevin said, we have to take a look about that third billing cycle question.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I don't see any other raised hands.
Going once, going twice. Okay, well, I'm going to then wrap us up here. I'm just going to put up the next steps we have and run through them. Hopefully everyone can see this now. So the company slides are already up on DMS. They're filed in the docket, and we're going to post a recording of this WebEx to the Commission CBRE website, which is linked here. As we've mentioned a couple times, any additional questions that you might have, please send them to puc.comments@hawaii.gov. Put CBRE in the subject line. That'll help us sort it out. And if you can get those to us by the close of business on July 31st, then we will forward those along to the companies. And if you can, please respond to those by August 5th. And we'll try and get those back to everybody. And I think we'll likely post all that information, the questions and the answers, on that same CBRE website. So hopefully that will become a hub for all of this information. The next procedural deadline in the docket is August 12th. That's the deadline for the parties to file comments on the draft tariff and the RFPs. And based on those comments, where the companies then have a deadline to file final versions by September 8th, 2020, and then the Commission will take action on that. I see Isaac has raised his hand.
I think he may have answered at the very last sentence there of it. I was asking, when's the Commission's opportunity to accept, modify, as necessary, the proposal? So that would come after the submission of the final draft, then?
Correct. Yes, the Commission will be issuing some sort of order after the submission of those the final drafts.
Thank you.
And if there aren't any other questions, I just want to say thank you to everybody who's still on the call. We had over 100 participants, which certainly exceeded our expectations. That's great. Thanks for all of the excellent questions from all the stakeholders, and thanks to the companies for these great presentations and for staying on for the extra time. I think it really helps. So thank you, everybody. I think this is a great kickoff to phase 2. with that, I think we will close this tech conference and look forward to the next sets of filings.